In the smoldering aftermath of the Horus Heresy, as the Imperium struggled to rebuild from the most devastating betrayal in human history, a new force was being forged in absolute secrecy. The Grey Knights would become the Emperor's final legacy, his last Space Marine chapter, created not for conquest or even defense, but for a singular, critical purpose: to combat the darkest threat facing humanity, the demonic entities of the warp. The seeds of the Grey Knights were planted even before the final confrontation between the Emperor and Horus aboard the Vengeful Spirit. Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's most trusted advisor and the first High Lord of Terra, had foreseen the need for warriors specifically equipped to battle the forces of chaos. While the Imperium's attention was fixed on the visible traitors, Malcador understood that the true enemy was more insidious: the corrupting entities that had seduced half the Space Marine legions into rebellion. In the later stages of the heresy, as the traitor legions approached Terra, Malcador embarked on a clandestine mission of immense importance. He gathered 8 individuals from across the Imperium, loyal Space Marines from both Loyalist and traitor legions, chosen not just for their martial prowess, but for their incorruptible nature and psychic potential. These 8 warriors would form the foundation of what would become the Grey Knights chapter. The identities of these founding members were deliberately obscured from Imperial records, though fragments of evidence suggest they included warriors from diverse origins. Among them was Janus, who would become the first Supreme Grand Master of the Grey Knights. Some accounts suggest Janus may have carried gene seed from a loyalist remnant of the Thousand Sons, though such claims remain highly classified. Other founding members included warriors who had proven their loyalty despite overwhelming odds, Space Marines who had rejected their Primarch's fall to chaos and remained steadfast in their devotion to the Emperor. What made this gathering especially remarkable was that Malcador collected these warriors at the Emperor's direct command. Even as the Master of Mankind prepared for the inevitable confrontation with his fallen son, he allocated precious time and resources to this secretive project. This demonstrates the Emperor's extraordinary foresight. Even in the darkest hour, he was planning defenses against future threats that would emerge long after the current conflict ended. The Emperor's involvement went far beyond merely authorizing the chapter's creation. He personally modified the gene seed that would be used to create future Grey Knights. Unlike other Space Marine chapters, whose genetic template derived from their respective Primarchs, the Grey Knight's gene seed was crafted from the Emperor's own genetic material. This unprecedented decision created Space Marines with capabilities beyond those of their cousins in other chapters. The Emperor's direct genetic legacy granted the Grey Knights enhanced resistance to the corrupting influence of chaos and amplified psychic potential. While standard Space Marines might succumb to demonic influence over time or through exposure, the Grey Knights were engineered to remain pure. Their minds were structured differently, with additional hypno-indoctrination and psychic conditioning that made them virtually immune to corruption. In the 10,000 years since their founding, not a single Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos, a record unmatched by any other Space Marine chapter. This unique gene seed also manifested in the Grey Knight's universal psychic abilities. While psychic talent emerges occasionally in other chapters, every Grey Knight is a powerful psyker. Their abilities range from telepathy and telekinesis to pyrokinesis and divination, all carefully honed and controlled through rigorous training. This universal psychic potential is directly linked to their modified gene seed and represents perhaps the most significant divergence from standard Adeptus Astartes biology. As Malcador gathered these founding members, he needed a secure location to establish their base of operations, a fortress that could serve as both training ground and sanctuary. The choice fell upon Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. This selection was not arbitrary. Titan's remote location in the Sol system provided natural isolation, while its size offered ample space for the extensive facilities required to train and equip such specialized warriors. What truly set Titan apart, however, was what occurred during the final stages of the Horus Heresy. As the traitor legions approached Terra, Malcador performed one of the most astonishing feats of psychic power ever recorded. Using his immense psychic abilities, he removed Titan from real space entirely, concealing it within the warp itself. This extraordinary act kept the nascent Grey Knights and their fortress monastery completely hidden from Horus and his forces. The moon remained hidden in the warp for the duration of the Siege of Terra. While time flows differently in the Imperium, for those on Titan, years passed as they constructed their fortress and began their training. The fortress monastery they built was unlike any other Space Marine chapter house. Named the Citadel of Titan, it was designed not just as a military installation, but as a psychic bastion. The Citadel incorporated ancient technologies and arcane defenses specifically calibrated to repel demonic entities. Its walls were inscribed with wards of banishment and protection, while its chambers included facilities for the specialized training Grey Knights would require. Deep within the fortress lay the Sanctum Sanctorum, where the chapter's most powerful artifacts would eventually be housed, and the Librarium Daemonica, containing forbidden knowledge of the warp and its denizens that existed nowhere else in the Imperium. After the Emperor's internment in the Golden Throne, Titan was returned to real space. The Grey Knights emerged as a fully formed chapter, their existence known only to the highest echelons of the Imperium. They were placed directly under the authority of the Ordo Malleus, the demon-hunting branch of the Inquisition that was established around the same time. The relationship between the Grey Knights and the Inquisition was symbiotic from the beginning. While technically a Space Marine chapter, the Grey Knights operated outside the standard command structure of the Adeptus Astartes. They answered not to the High Lords of Terra, or even to the Lord Commander of the Imperium, but to the Inquisition alone. This unique arrangement granted them exceptional autonomy and ensured their activities remained shrouded in secrecy. The training regime established for Grey Knight aspirants was unlike anything seen in other chapters. While all Space Marine training is brutal and comprehensive, Grey Knight conditioning went several steps further. Aspirants were selected not just for physical potential, but for psychic ability and mental fortitude. Many were taken as children from black ships, the vessels that collected psychically gifted individuals from across the Imperium. The initial trials eliminated all but the strongest candidates. Those who survived faced memory obliteration. All knowledge of their previous lives was erased, replaced with the lore and traditions of the chapter. This process ensured absolute loyalty and removed any potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by demonic entities. The aspirants were then subjected to extensive psychic conditioning, teaching them to harness their abilities while maintaining perfect control. Combat training for Grey Knights emphasized techniques specifically designed to combat demonic entities. They learned not just how to fight with bolter and blade, but how to recognize different classes of demons, their weaknesses, and the most effective methods to banish them back to the warp. This specialized knowledge was supplemented with extensive study of forbidden texts, dangerous information that would be considered heretical in the wider Imperium, but was essential for those tasked with combating the forces of chaos. The final stage of a Grey Knight's creation involved the implantation of 666 protective wards directly into their flesh. These psychically active sigils provided additional protection against demonic influence and enhanced the warrior's ability to channel psychic energy. Combined with their unique gene seed, these modifications created Space Marines specifically optimized for demon hunting. The weaponry and equipment provided to the Grey Knights reflected their specialized role. Each warrior received a Nemesis force weapon, a masterfully crafted blade or hammer psychically attuned to its wielder, and designed to channel their psychic energy into devastating attacks against warp entities. Their armor incorporated additional warding and psychic circuitry, while their bolters fired specialized ammunition designed to harm demonic entities. Perhaps the most significant aspect of the Grey Knights' founding was the absolute secrecy surrounding their existence. The Emperor and Malcador understood that knowledge of demons was itself dangerous. Exposure to such information could corrupt even well-intentioned individuals. Consequently, the Grey Knights operated in complete secrecy for thousands of years. When they deployed to combat demonic incursions, any Imperial forces that witnessed their actions were typically mind-wiped or eliminated to preserve the secret of their existence. This policy of absolute secrecy extended even to other Space Marine chapters. For millennia, most Adeptus Astartes remained unaware of their demon-hunting brothers. Only in the most dire circumstances would the Grey Knights reveal themselves to other Imperial forces, and even then, only to the highest-ranking commanders. The Grey Knights' fortress on Titan grew over the millennia into a sprawling complex of training facilities, armories, and warded chambers. The moon's atmosphere was terraformed to support human life, though access remained strictly controlled. Various defense systems were installed, including orbital platforms and psychic barriers that could detect and repel unauthorized approach. Deep beneath the surface of Titan, the Grey Knights constructed vast chambers to house their most dangerous artifacts, demonic weapons captured in battle-bound entities, and corrupted relics too dangerous to destroy but too valuable to discard. These vaults were protected by layers of physical and psychic defenses, ensuring their contents remained securely contained. As the first Grey Knights completed their training and took their places as full battle brothers, they organized themselves into a unique chapter structure. Rather than the standard 10 companies of most Space Marine chapters, the Grey Knights formed into brotherhoods, each specialized in combating particular types of demonic threats. At the head of each brotherhood stood a brother captain, while the entire chapter was led by the Supreme Grand Master. The first deployments of the Grey Knights came in the chaotic aftermath of the heresy, as reality itself remained wounded from the tremendous psychic energies unleashed during that conflict. Warp rifts appeared across the galaxy, allowing demonic entities to slip into real space. The Grey Knights moved swiftly and silently to contain these incursions, often arriving and departing without the local Imperial authorities even realizing the nature of the threat they had faced. The fortress monastery of the Grey Knights rises from the terraformed surface of Titan like a monument to humanity's defiance against the warp. Unlike the typically Gothic and cathedral-like structures favored by most Space Marine chapters, the Citadel of Titan presents a more austere and functional appearance at first glance. Its outer walls, constructed from adamantium-reinforced ferrocrete, stand over 200 meters tall, their surfaces inscribed with thousands of protective wards that shimmer with subtle psychic energy when approached. These are not mere decorative elements. Each sigil forms part of an interconnected psychic defense system that makes the fortress virtually impenetrable to demonic entities. The approach to the Citadel is deliberately forbidding. 8 massive towers mark the cardinal and ordinal points of the fortress perimeter, each housing batteries of defense weapons, including void shield generators and specialized warp banishment artillery. These weapons, rarely seen elsewhere in the Imperium, are designed specifically to target and disrupt the metaphysical structure of demonic entities, rather than merely damaging their temporary physical forms. The fortress is surrounded by a no-man's land of psychically active terrain that distorts and weakens any warp entities that attempt to cross it. Entry to the Citadel is permitted through a single massive gate known as the Argent Portal. Standing 60 meters tall and 30 meters wide, this entryway is constructed from a unique alloy incorporating silver, psychically attuned crystals, and metals salvaged from pre-Imperial artifacts of unknown origin. The portal is perpetually guarded by a full squad of Terminator-armored Grey Knights who stand immobile like silver statues, their minds linked through a psychic communion that allows them to respond instantly to any threat. Once past the Argent Portal, visitors, of which there are exceedingly few, encounter the Chambers of Purity. This series of interconnected halls serves as both a final defense line and a purification zone. Any individual entering the fortress must pass through these chambers, where powerful psychic fields strip away any taint of the warp. For ordinary humans, this process can be intensely uncomfortable, causing temporary hallucinations and sensory distortions. For those already harboring even-minute traces of corruption, the experience is fatal. The chambers are lined with polished silver surfaces that reflect not just light but psychic energy, creating a complex matrix that isolates and eliminates any warp influence. Beyond the Chambers of Purity lies the heart of the fortress, the central keep that houses the chapter's most sacred and secretive facilities. The architecture here shifts noticeably, incorporating elements that would seem familiar to the ancient Terran civilizations of Greece and Rome, with clean lines and mathematically precise proportions. This is no aesthetic choice, but a deliberate implementation of psychically resonant geometries that strengthen the barrier between real space and the warp. Deep within this central structure resides the Librarius Daemonica, perhaps the most dangerous library in human possession. Unlike the libraries of other Space Marine chapters that primarily house battle records and technical manuals, the Librarius Daemonica contains comprehensive information on every encountered demonic entity, their capabilities, weaknesses, and methods of banishment. The knowledge contained within these volumes would be considered extremely heretical elsewhere in the Imperium, where even awareness of demons' existence is restricted information. The Librarius is a vast circular chamber with shelves extending from floor to ceiling, containing thousands of tomes bound in materials ranging from simple leather to human skin and more exotic substances. Many of the books are chained in place and sealed with psychic locks that respond only to authorized Grey Knights. The center of the chamber features a massive circular table of polished obsidian, upon which particularly dangerous texts can be examined within a containment field. Servitors specially modified with psychic nullification implants patrol the stacks, monitoring for any anomalous energy signatures that might indicate a text attempting to exert corrupting influence. Maintaining the Librarius is the responsibility of a specialized cadre of Grey Knight librarians who possess additional psychic conditioning beyond even the formidable protections granted to standard battle brothers. These custodians work in shifts, ensuring the collection remains properly contained and cataloged. New information is constantly added as the Grey Knights encounter and defeat previously unknown warp entities. Adjacent to the Librarius stands the Purifier Keep, a fortress within the fortress that serves as the headquarters for the Purifier Order. These elite Grey Knights specialize in cleansing areas of demonic contamination and are considered the most resistant to corruption among an already incorruptible brotherhood. The Keep's walls are composed of a unique compound, incorporating the ashes of demons successfully banished back to the warp, creating a material that actively repels warp energies. Within the Purifier Keep lies the Flame Eternal, a silver brazier containing fire said to have been kindled from the Emperor's own psychic energy before his internment in the Golden Throne. This flame burns without fuel and cannot be extinguished by conventional means. Purifiers use this sacred fire in rituals of cleansing and to ignite their specialized weapons. The chamber housing the flame is perfectly circular, its ceiling a dome inlaid with silver constellations that map not the stars of real space, but the shifting currents of the warp itself. The Hall of Champions occupies one of the highest points in the Citadel, its vaulted ceiling rising nearly 100 meters above the floor. Unlike the memorial halls of other chapters that display armor and weapons of fallen heroes, the Grey Knights Hall of Champions contains no physical artifacts. Instead, the walls are inscribed with the names of every Grey Knight who has fallen in service since the chapter's founding. These names are not carved or painted, but maintained through a continuous psychic imprint by designated battle brothers who serve as the chapter's remembrancers. What makes the hall truly remarkable is the psychic resonance that permeates the chamber. Grey Knights who enter the hall experience echoes of their fallen brothers' final moments, not as trauma or horror, but as inspirational examples of ultimate sacrifice. This phenomenon is not accidental, but the result of careful psychic engineering that captures a portion of each dying knight's psychic essence and preserves it within the hall's structure. For a chapter that must regularly face the most horrific entities in existence, this connection to their predecessors provides crucial psychological reinforcement. The northern quadrant of the Citadel houses the Augurium, a massive complex dedicated to monitoring warp activity throughout the galaxy. The central chamber features a hololithic projection of the Milky Way, 30 meters in diameter, with real-time indicators of warp disturbances and potential demonic incursions. Surrounding this projection are hundreds of meditation cells where the chapter's prognosticators, Grey Knights with specialized training in divination, maintain constant vigilance over assigned sectors of space. The prognosticators operate in a state of semi-trance, their minds partially immersed in the currents of the warp, while their bodies remain safely anchored in real space. Through this dangerous technique, they can detect subtle patterns and disturbances that might indicate imminent demonic activity. Their findings are relayed to the Augurium's central cogitator systems, which analyze the data and prioritize threats for chapter response. This early warning system has prevented countless demonic invasions before they could fully materialize. The work of the prognosticators is physically and mentally taxing. Even with their enhanced physiology and psychic conditioning, few can maintain the necessary level of warp immersion for more than a few hours at a time. A strict rotation system ensures that no individual pushes beyond safe limits, though the definition of safe in this context would horrify conventional Imperial authorities. The strain of this duty is such that many prognosticators eventually transfer to combat roles, their minds requiring the relative simplicity of physical battle after years of psychic surveillance. Perhaps the most unique facility within the Citadel is the Manufactorum Daemonicum, where the chapter's specialized weapons and equipment are created. Unlike standard Adeptus Astartes forge facilities that focus primarily on maintenance and minor modifications of standardized equipment, the Manufactorum produces truly unique items specifically designed for combat against warp entities. The Manufactorum occupies several subterranean levels beneath the main fortress, its workshops arranged in concentric circles around a central forge dominated by a massive furnace known as the Soul Kiln. This remarkable device can reach temperatures far beyond conventional metallurgical requirements, enabling the forging of psychically attuned materials that would be impossible to work with standard equipment. The kiln's heat source is not chemical or nuclear but psychic, the focused mental energy of a cadre of techmarine psychers who maintain the necessary temperatures through continuous concentration. The creation of a Nemesis Force weapon, the signature armament of the Grey Knights, is a process that takes years to complete. The basic physical form is forged from adamantium alloyed with other, more exotic materials including psychically active crystals, and in some cases, microscopic fragments of the Emperor's own armor. As the weapon takes shape, it is repeatedly quenched not in water or oil, but in sanctified solutions containing the blood of Grey Knights and dissolved silver. Throughout the forging process, master psychers imprint the developing weapon with wards and psychic resonators that will allow it to channel its wielder's psychic energy. Once the physical construction is complete, the weapon undergoes a series of rituals to bind it psychically to the Grey Knight who will carry it into battle. This bonding process creates a sympathetic link between warrior and weapon that allows for unprecedented precision in channeling warp energies. A properly bonded Nemesis weapon becomes effectively an extension of the Grey Knight's own body and mind, responding to his thoughts as readily as to physical movement. The Manufactorum also produces the Grey Knight's distinctive Aegis armor. While superficially similar to standard Adeptus Astartes power armor, Aegis suits incorporate numerous modifications specifically designed to protect against warp influences. Each ceramic plate is inscribed with microscopic wards, while the armor circuitry includes psychically active components that help maintain a barrier against demonic possession or influence. The silver plating that gives the Grey Knights their distinctive appearance is not merely decorative. Silver has natural properties that disrupt certain types of warp energy, and the specific alloy used in Grey Knight armor enhances this effect. The production of each suit of Aegis armor requires the sacrifice of at least one psyker, whose life energy is used to empower the suit's protective wards. This practice, while considered extreme even by Imperial standards, is deemed necessary given the armor's critical role in protecting its wearer from demonic influence. The psychers used for this purpose are typically drawn from those deemed too unstable for service aboard black ships, but possessed of sufficiently powerful abilities to make their sacrifice worthwhile. Adjacent to the main forges lies the Chamber of Trials, where newly created weapons and armor are tested against contained warp energies to ensure their protective capabilities function as intended. This dangerous facility is surrounded by multiple layers of psychic wards and physical barriers, with emergency banishment protocols ready to be activated should any test result in unexpected manifestations. Beyond the physical fortifications of Titan lies a more profound defense, the incorruptible nature of the Grey Knights themselves. In the long and blood-soaked history of the Imperium, where even the mightiest have fallen to corruption, the Grey Knights stand as a singular exception. For 10,000 years, across countless confrontations with the most insidious forces of chaos, not a single battle brother has ever succumbed to the whispers of the warp. This perfect record is no accident, but the result of layered protective measures that begin before a recruit takes their first breath as a Grey Knight. The foundation of this incorruptibility lies in the specialized gene seed implanted into every Grey Knight aspirant. Unlike standard Astartes gene seed derived from Primarch genetic material, Grey Knight progenoids contain genetic material directly from the Emperor himself. This unique lineage provides an inherent resistance to chaos corruption that exceeds even that of other Space Marines. The Emperor's genetic contribution introduces psychic markers that make Grey Knight minds naturally hostile territory for demonic influence, like trying to establish a foothold on constantly shifting ground. This genetic advantage is merely the starting point. Upon selection, Grey Knight aspirants undergo a process known as the Forgetting, a complete psychic mind wipe that erases all memories of their previous existence. The procedure is conducted by a conclave of the chapter's most powerful librarians, who meticulously excise every memory, every emotional attachment, and every personal experience from the aspirant's mind. This process is not merely about removing potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited by chaos entities. It creates a clean psychic slate upon which the Grey Knight's indoctrination can be built without interference from pre-existing thought patterns. The Forgetting is conducted in specialized chambers deep within Titan's fortress. The aspirant is secured to a silver throne inscribed with psycho-reactive circuitry that amplifies the librarian's abilities while protecting them from psychic backlash. The procedure typically lasts several days, during which the aspirant's brain activity is constantly monitored to ensure no memory engrams escape the process. The physical pain is considerable, but the psychic trauma is far greater. Effectively, the person who enters the chamber dies, though their body continues to function. What emerges from this process is not a blank slate, but a carefully prepared foundation. As the aspirant recovers, hypno-indoctrination begins immediately. Unlike the relatively straightforward hypno-training used by other Astartes chapters to implant knowledge, Grey Knight indoctrination operates at multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously. While the surface mind absorbs tactical information and combat protocols, deeper layers of consciousness are being restructured to create natural resistance to chaos influence. This restructuring includes the implementation of thought patterns that automatically reject certain concepts. Grey Knights cannot comprehend surrendering to chaos, not in the sense that they would refuse to do so, but in that their minds literally cannot process the concept. The neural pathways required for such thoughts are systematically eliminated and replaced with structures that automatically redirect toward loyalty and resistance. This is not simple brainwashing, but a fundamental redesign of how the Grey Knight's mind operates. Throughout this process, aspirants are kept in isolation chambers where the air itself is saturated with sanctified incense and microscopic particles of silver and other warp-resistant materials. These particles are absorbed through the respiratory system and become incorporated into the aspirant's developing physiology, creating a subtle but significant physical resistance to warp energies that complements their mental conditioning. Once the basic hypno-indoctrination is complete, the aspirant begins the most challenging aspect of their transformation, mastering the 666 rituals of detestation. These rituals are not merely symbolic exercises, but practical psychic techniques that strengthen the Grey Knight's mental defenses and offensive capabilities against warp entities. Each ritual addresses a specific aspect of demonic nature and teaches methods to counter it. The first 100 rituals focus on recognition, training the Grey Knight to identify different classes and types of demons, their typical manifestation patterns, and the subtle signs that precede their appearance. This knowledge is crucial not just for combat effectiveness, but for mental defense, as understanding a demon's nature is the first step in resisting its influence. These initial rituals are taught in secured chambers, where hololithic projectors display accurate representations of demonic entities, carefully calibrated to provide necessary information without risking corruption. The second 100 rituals concentrate on resistance, techniques to shield one's mind from the psychic assaults that typically precede demonic attacks. Grey Knights learn to construct mental architectures that automatically redirect hostile psychic energy, turning the demons' attacks back upon themselves. These techniques involve complex visualization exercises where the aspirant must maintain precise mental images while being subjected to controlled psychic pressure from their instructors. Rituals 200 through 300 focus on banishment, the psychic techniques required to sever a demon's connection to real space and force it back into the warp. These are among the most practically applicable combat skills a Grey Knight learns, forming the basis of many of their battlefield abilities. Aspirants practice these techniques on specially prepared psychic constructs, not actual demons, but psychic simulations that respond as demons would to banishment attempts. The fourth 100 rituals address purification, methods to cleanse areas, objects, or even people of lingering warp contamination. These techniques are particularly important for Grey Knights serving with the Purifier Brotherhood, who specialize in cleansing corruption. The training involves exposure to carefully controlled warp-tainted materials under strict supervision, with senior purifiers ready to intervene should anything go wrong. Rituals 500 through 600 deal with fortification, techniques to strengthen not just the Grey Knight's own psychic defenses, but to extend that protection to others. These rituals enable Grey Knights to create temporary zones of protection on battlefields, sheltering vulnerable Imperial forces from warp influence during critical operations. Mastering these techniques requires extraordinary psychic control, as the Grey Knight must project protective energy outward while maintaining their own defenses. The final 66 rituals are known collectively as the Protocols of Anathema. These represent the most advanced and dangerous techniques in the Grey Knight arsenal, methods to directly attack a demon's fundamental nature by channeling energy similar to that wielded by the Emperor himself. These rituals are taught only to those who have perfectly mastered all previous levels, as they involve psychic manipulations that would kill an unprepared mind. The training takes place in specially consecrated chambers where the very air crackles with protective energy, and even then, casualties are not unknown. Mastering all 666 rituals typically takes decades, with each Grey Knight progressing at their own pace based on aptitude and psychic potential. Some particularly gifted individuals may complete the full sequence within 20 years, while others might require 50 or more. There is no shame in slower progress. The chapter values thoroughness over speed, knowing that incomplete mastery could leave vulnerabilities. Throughout this training, Grey Knights are continuously monitored for any signs of corruption or weakness. Specialized psyker serfs, themselves subjected to extensive conditioning and often physically blindfolded to protect them from what they might witness, scan the aspirants regularly. Any indication of susceptibility to warp influence results in immediate termination, a mercy compared to the alternatives. Beyond the 666 rituals, Grey Knights receive instruction in the most dangerous knowledge in the Imperium, the true names of demons. Every warp entity possesses a true name, a sonic encapsulation of its essential nature. Knowledge of this name grants power over the demon, allowing a properly trained psyker to weaken or even control the entity. The Grey Knights maintain the most extensive collection of demonic true names in existence, stored in the Librarium Daemonica under multiple layers of psychic protection. The study of true names occurs only after a Grey Knight has completely mastered the 666 rituals, as the knowledge is inherently corrupting to inadequately protected minds. Even then, Grey Knights typically learn only those names relevant to their current mission, with the full catalog known only to the highest-ranking members of the chapter. The names themselves are not merely spoken words, but complex psycho-linguistic constructs that must be pronounced with perfect inflection while maintaining specific mental patterns. In combat, a Grey Knight who knows a demon's true name gains a significant advantage. Properly invoking the name causes the demon physical pain and disrupts its ability to maintain cohesion in real space. More importantly, it creates a momentary connection between the Grey Knight and the demon's fundamental nature, a connection the Grey Knight can exploit to deliver a killing blow that affects not just the demon's physical manifestation, but its warp presence as well. The protection of this knowledge is one of the chapter's highest priorities. Grey Knights are conditioned to commit suicide rather than risk capture with this information, and multiple fail-safe protocols exist to destroy the archives should the fortress on Titan ever be compromised. The Inquisition maintains a permanent presence in the Librarium, with representatives of the Ordo Malleus constantly monitoring access and usage of this dangerous knowledge. To further ensure their incorruptibility, Grey Knights undergo regular purification rituals throughout their service. These are not merely ceremonial but practical psychic cleansings that remove any accumulated warp exposure before it can take root. The most common is the ritual of the Iron Soul, performed after every combat deployment involving demonic entities. The Battle Brothers gather in circular chambers where specialized field generators create a purifying matrix of energy. As sacred oils and unguents are applied to their bodies, the Grey Knights enter a meditative state where they systematically examine their recent experiences, identifying and excising any potentially corrupting influences. For more serious contamination, the chapter employs the cleansing of the 7 spheres, a grueling ritual that can last up to 7 days. The Grey Knight is sealed in a silver chamber, inscribed with concentric circles of protective wards. Starting from the outermost circle, they must work their way inward, passing through increasingly intense fields of purifying energy. Each sphere addresses a different aspect of potential corruption, from physical taint to subtle psychic influence. Few Grey Knights require this ritual more than once or twice in their service, as their regular purification practices prevent serious contamination. The final layer of protection lies in the Grey Knights' battle practices themselves. Unlike other Imperial forces that might face chaos corruption through extended campaigns, Grey Knights operate with surgical precision. They deploy rapidly to the site of demonic incursion, complete their mission with maximum efficiency, and withdraw immediately. This minimizes exposure time and reduces the opportunity for corruption to take hold. Their specialized equipment, from their silver alloyed armor to their psychically attuned weapons, provides additional protection during these operations. The cumulative effect of these practices, genetic modification, memory obliteration, hypno-indoctrination, ritual mastery, and operational protocols, creates warriors who are functionally immune to chaos corruption. This immunity comes at an enormous cost, both to the individuals who surrender their past identities and to the Imperium that commits vast resources to maintaining this specialized force. Yet that cost has proven worthwhile countless times over the millennia, as the Grey Knights have confronted and defeated threats that would have overwhelmed any other Imperial force. The Grey Knights stand apart from all other Space Marine chapters not merely in their mission, but in their fundamental nature as warriors. While other Adeptus Astartes might occasionally manifest psychic abilities, for the Grey Knights, such power is not incidental but essential. Every battle brother, from the newest initiate to the Supreme Grand Master himself, is a psyker of considerable strength. This universal psychic capacity shapes every aspect of the chapter's organization, training, and combat doctrine. The requirement that all Grey Knights be psykers begins with their selection process. While standard Space Marine chapters seek physical specimens with appropriate genetic compatibility, the Grey Knights recruiters, specialized operatives who operate alongside the Black Ships, are searching for a much rarer combination of traits. Candidates must possess both the physical potential to survive Astartes' enhancement and latent psychic abilities of sufficient strength. This dual requirement drastically narrows the pool of viable aspirants, making Grey Knight recruitment extraordinarily selective. Most Grey Knight aspirants come from the Black Ships that traverse the Imperium, collecting psychically gifted individuals. The chapter's recruiters have priority access to these vessels, allowing them to identify and claim promising candidates before they reach Terra. The selection criteria are exacting. The ideal recruit possesses psychic potential that is both powerful and stable, showing minimal risk of uncontrolled manifestation. Physical attributes are secondary but still important. The candidate must be young enough to receive implants, but resilient enough to survive the grueling transformation process. Once selected, aspirants undergo the standard physical modifications of Space Marine creation, with several crucial differences. The implantation of the Grey Knight's unique gene seed not only enhances their bodies, but also strengthens and stabilizes their psychic potential. The process includes additional procedures specifically designed to forge connections between the aspirant's physical form and psychic abilities, ensuring the two aspects develop in tandem rather than separately as often happens with psychers in other chapters. The catalepsian node implant, which allows Space Marines to function with minimal sleep, is modified in Grey Knights to facilitate psychic training during rest periods. While a battle brother's body recuperates, his mind engages in structured psychic exercises, effectively doubling the training time available. The omophagia, which typically allows Space Marines to gain knowledge by consuming flesh, is adapted to filter and process psychic impressions from such consumption without risking contamination from warp-tainted materials. Perhaps the most significant modification involves the black carapace, the subdermal implant that allows Space Marines to interface directly with their power armor. In Grey Knights, this interface includes psycho-reactive circuitry that connects their armor systems to their psychic abilities. This modification enables the battle brother to channel psychic energy through his armor, enhancing both offensive capabilities and defensive wards. The universal psychic nature of the Grey Knights necessitates a chapter organization quite different from the Codex Astartes model. Rather than organizing primarily by battlefield role, Grey Knight brotherhoods are structured around psychic specializations and demonic threat types. Each brotherhood develops expertise in countering specific classes of warp entities, with training and equipment optimized for their designated foes. The Wardmaker's Brotherhood, for example, specializes in creating and maintaining psychic wards that can contain or repel demonic entities. Their battle brothers undergo additional training in complex ward crafting techniques and often deploy to reinforce locations at risk of warp breaches. The Prescient Brotherhood focuses on divination and foresight, their members skilled at predicting demonic manifestations and determining the most effective countermeasures. The Preserver's Brotherhood specializes in recovery operations, extracting valuable artifacts or personnel from demon-infested areas while minimizing corruption risks. This specialized structure extends to the chapter's command hierarchy. While the Grey Knights maintain the standard ranks of Battle Brother, Justicar, Brother Captain, and Grand Master, each position carries additional psychic responsibilities beyond combat leadership. Justicars, who lead individual squads, must maintain psychic cohesion among their battle brothers, linking their abilities to enhance overall effectiveness. Brother Captains command brotherhoods and serve as psychic anchors, their disciplined minds providing stability that allows their subordinates to employ more aggressive psychic techniques without risk of losing control. Grand Masters represent the pinnacle of Grey Knight psychic development. Each has mastered at least one of the chapter's unique psychic disciplines to its highest level, giving them capabilities that would seem miraculous even to other psychers. The Supreme Grand Master, who leads the entire chapter, possesses a psychic presence so powerful that even greater demons approach with caution, recognizing a threat to their very existence. The Grey Knight's combat doctrine revolves around their psychic abilities, with conventional weapons serving as supplements rather than primary tools. While they are certainly formidable in physical combat, their enhanced bodies and superb training ensure that their true strength lies in harnessing the power of the warp against itself. This approach requires disciplines and techniques unique to the chapter, developed over millennia of combating demonic entities. Most fundamental among these disciplines is sanctic demonology, a carefully controlled application of warp energy specifically calibrated to counter and banish demonic entities. Unlike the corrupted practices of chaos sorcerers, sanctic techniques maintain rigid safeguards that prevent contamination while channeling similar energies. This discipline walks a dangerous line, using the warp's own power against its denizens without succumbing to its influence. Sanctic demonology encompasses numerous techniques, each designed for specific combat situations. The Gate of Infinity allows Grey Knights to create controlled warp portals for rapid redeployment, bypassing physical barriers and allowing for sudden strikes against vulnerable targets. Unlike conventional teleportation, which remains somewhat unpredictable, These portals are stabilized by the Grey Knight's psychic control, making precision insertion possible even in chaotic battle conditions. Hammerhand, another sanctic technique, infuses the Grey Knight's strikes with warp energy that disrupts a demon's physical form at the point of impact. This makes even glancing blows potentially devastating, as the energy unravels the tenuous connection between the demon's warp presence and its material manifestation. Experienced practitioners can focus this effect so precisely that they can sever specific aspects of a demon's power, temporarily neutralizing particular abilities or vulnerabilities. Perhaps the most powerful sanctic technique is Holocaust, which creates a controlled psychic detonation centered on the Grey Knight. This devastating ability purges an area of demonic presence, banishing lesser entities outright and severely weakening greater demons. The energy released specifically targets warp signatures, leaving physical structures and uncontaminated personnel relatively unharmed. This selectivity makes Holocaust invaluable for cleansing infested locations without destroying valuable infrastructure. Beyond sanctic demonology, Grey Knights practice several other psychic disciplines adapted to their unique mission. Astral divination allows them to track demonic movements through the warp, predicting where and when incursions might occur. This discipline is particularly valuable for preventive deployments, positioning Grey Knight forces before manifestations occur rather than responding after the fact. Telekinetic assault provides techniques for enhancing physical combat with psychic force. Grey Knights trained in this discipline can accelerate their movements beyond even standard Astartes capabilities, redirect enemy attacks with precise telekinetic nudges, or create invisible barriers that deflect incoming fire. Masters of this discipline demonstrate combat speeds that appear supernatural even to other Space Marines, their movements guided and enhanced by psychic energy. Psychic communion enables coordinated psychic efforts, allowing multiple Grey Knights to combine their abilities for greater effect. This discipline includes techniques for establishing secure mental links that facilitate silent communication and coordinated psychic attacks. In combat, a squad linked through psychic communion can function with perfect coordination, each battle brother aware of his companion's intentions without need for verbal or visual signals. The application of these psychic disciplines requires specialized equipment, most notably the Nemesis force weapons that serve as each Grey Knight's primary armament. These master-crafted weapons are more than mere tools of war. They are psychically attuned extensions of the battle brother's will, designed to channel and amplify his abilities in combat against warp entities. The creation of a Nemesis weapon begins long before a Grey Knight initiate completes his training. The physical blade, hammer, or halberd is forged from adamantium alloyed with psychically responsive materials, including trace amounts of the same silver used in the chapter's armor. Throughout the forging process, Techmarine Psychers imprint the developing weapon with wards and energy conduits that will allow it to channel warp power safely and efficiently. As the Grey Knight progresses through his training, samples of his blood and psychic imprints are incorporated into the weapon, creating a sympathetic link that will eventually allow for intuitive control. The final stages of preparation involve rituals conducted in the Chamber of Resonance, where the initiate and his designated weapon are subjected to alternating fields of warp energy and nullification, strengthening the connection between them while ensuring the weapon remains resistant to corruption. Once fully attuned, a Nemesis force weapon responds to its wielder's psychic impulses as readily as to physical movement. The Grey Knight can channel energy through the weapon to enhance cutting power, generate disruptive fields that weaken demonic entities, or even project focused blasts of psychic force at distant targets. The weapon's responses become so integrated with the Battle Brothers' combat instincts that many Grey Knights report their Nemesis weapons moving to counter threats before they consciously registered the danger. Different forms of Nemesis weapons favor different combat applications. The Nemesis Force Sword, with its balanced design, serves as an excellent channel for precision psychic techniques, allowing for targeted disruption of demonic vulnerabilities. The Nemesis Demon Hammer sacrifices some precision for raw power, creating psychic shockwaves on impact that can stagger even the mightiest warp entities. The Nemesis Halberd combines reach with versatility, its design allowing for both sweeping attacks against multiple lesser demons and focused strikes against greater threats. Complementing these weapons is the Grey Knight's Aegis armor, a specialized variant of Astartes' power armor incorporating numerous psychic enhancement and protection systems. Beyond the standard life support and strength augmentation functions, Aegis armor features a network of psycho-conductive circuitry that serves two primary purposes: channeling the wearer's psychic abilities while protecting against external warp influences. The most visible component of this system is the armor's distinctive silver plating. This is not merely decorative or symbolic. The specific silver alloy used possesses natural warp-resistant properties, disrupting certain types of demonic energies on contact. The plating is inscribed with microscopic wards that form interconnected patterns across the entire armor surface, creating a comprehensive defensive matrix that automatically responds to warp threats. Beneath this external layer lies the armor's psychic circuitry, crystalline filaments embedded in the ceramite plates that connect to the black carapace interface implanted in the Grey Knight's body. This circuitry allows for precise control of psychic energy flow, enabling techniques that would be dangerous or impossible without such regulation. A Grey Knight can channel power through specific sections of his armor, reinforcing wards in areas facing particular threats or concentrating energy in his gauntlets before delivering a psychically enhanced strike. The armor's helmet incorporates additional systems specifically designed for combating demonic entities. The auto-senses include filters that can detect warp signatures invisible to normal equipment, highlighting potential manifestation points before demons fully materialize. Psychic amplifiers in the helmet's Vox system allow the Grey Knight to project his voice with supernatural authority, his commands carrying power that can momentarily disrupt demonic concentration or even cause pain to lesser warp entities. The mastery of the Aegis extends beyond equipment to include psychic techniques that enhance the Grey Knight's defensive capabilities. The Sanctuary power creates a sphere of protective energy that repels demonic entities, forcing them to expend considerable power just to approach the battle brother. This technique can be maintained while fighting, creating a mobile zone of protection that weakens any demon that ventures within striking distance. Hammerhand, while primarily offensive in nature, includes defensive applications that reinforce the Grey Knight's physical form against warp-based attacks. By channeling psychic energy through his musculature and skeletal structure, the battle brother can withstand blows that would tear apart conventional armor and resist corrupting energies that would overwhelm standard warding. Masters of this technique can extend its protection to nearby allies, creating a bubble of enhanced resilience around themselves. The Purge Soul technique represents one of the most potent defensive abilities in the Grey Knight arsenal. This advanced application of sanctic demonology turns a demon's own nature against it, using the entity's connection to the warp as a conduit for purifying energy. When successfully employed, Purge Soul can not only repel a demonic attack but temporarily sever the entity's connection to its power source, leaving it vulnerable to conventional weapons. These defensive techniques are particularly valuable because Grey Knights frequently face overwhelming numerical odds. Demonic incursions typically involve swarms of lesser entities supporting more powerful warp beings, all capable of attacking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The combination of Aegis armor and psychic defensive techniques allows Grey Knights to withstand such assaults long enough to identify and target the primary threats, often the summoners or greater demons controlling the manifestation. The Grey Knight's psychic combat doctrine emphasizes coordination and complementary abilities. While each battle brother is a formidable psyker individually, their true power emerges when they operate in concert. Squad formations are designed to maximize psychic synergy, with specialists in different disciplines supporting each other's strengths and compensating for vulnerabilities. The organizational structure of the Grey Knights defies the standard patterns laid out in the Codex Astartes, reflecting their unique purpose and psychic nature. While superficially similar to other Astartes chapters with ranks and command hierarchies, the Grey Knights operate according to esoteric principles that optimize their effectiveness against demonic threats. This deviation from standard Space Marine organization is not merely administrative but functional, a carefully designed system that maximizes the chapter's specialized capabilities. At the foundation of the Grey Knight's hierarchy stands the neophyte, though even this initial rank differs significantly from its counterparts in other chapters. Grey Knight neophytes have already completed the physical transformation into Space Marines and mastered basic combat techniques before earning this designation. What marks them as neophytes is not their physical development, but their psychic progression. They have yet to complete the 666 rituals of detestation and fully integrate their martial and psychic abilities. Neophytes train primarily within the fortress monastery on Titan, rarely deploying to actual combat zones unless circumstances are dire. Their training regimen is brutally intensive, with each day divided between physical combat drills, psychic exercises, and doctrinal study. A typical neophyte might spend the morning hours mastering blade techniques with training servitors, the afternoon in meditation chambers developing specific psychic abilities, and the evening studying demonic lore from sanctified texts that would be considered heretical elsewhere in the Imperium. Advancement from neophyte to full battle brother requires completion of the Trials of Ascension, a series of challenges that test both martial prowess and psychic control. These trials vary for each aspirant, tailored to probe specific weaknesses identified during training. A neophyte who excels in physical combat but struggles with psychic focus might face trials emphasizing mental discipline, while one with strong psychic abilities but less developed combat skills would confront physically demanding challenges. The final trial invariably involves confrontation with a controlled warp entity, not a true demon, which would be too dangerous, but a psychic construct created by the chapter's senior librarians to simulate demonic characteristics. The neophyte must banish this entity using the techniques he has learned, demonstrating both the skill and mental fortitude required for the Grey Knight's mission. Success elevates him to Battle Brother status, granting him a place in one of the chapter's brotherhoods and his first deployment against actual demonic threats. Unlike conventional Space Marine chapters organized into 10 companies of 100 Marines each, the Grey Knights structure themselves into 8 brotherhoods of varying sizes. This organizational principle centers around the number 8, a number of profound significance in combating the forces of chaos. In numerological terms, 8 stands in opposition to the sacred number of chaos, 8 representing order imposed upon disorder, stability countering instability. This symmetry is not coincidental but deliberate, embodying the Grey Knight's role as the perfect counter to chaos forces. Each brotherhood specializes in confronting particular demonic threats or employing specific combat techniques. The first brotherhood traditionally focuses on threats from Khorne, developing countermeasures against the blood god's berserker demons. The second brotherhood specializes in combating Tzynkian entities, their training emphasizing resistance to psychic manipulation and illusion. The third brotherhood concentrates on Nurgle's forces, mastering purification techniques effective against plague demons. The fourth brotherhood specializes in countering Slaaneshi threats, their mental conditioning providing exceptional resistance to the temptations and sensory assaults favored by the Dark Prince's servants. The remaining brotherhoods maintain more tactically oriented specializations. The fifth brotherhood excels at rapid deployment and extraction, often serving as the first responders to emerging demonic threats. The sixth brotherhood specializes in protracted engagements, their training emphasizing endurance and resource management for situations where immediate banishment proves impossible. The seventh brotherhood focuses on urban and void operations, developing techniques for combating demons in confined spaces where collateral damage concerns limit available tactics. The eighth brotherhood, smallest but most elite, consists primarily of veterans who serve as instructors and special operations units for the most sensitive missions. Each brotherhood operates under the command of a brother captain, a veteran Grey Knight who has demonstrated both tactical acumen and exceptional psychic ability. The brother captain bears responsibility not just for battlefield decisions, but for the spiritual and psychic well-being of his brotherhood. This dual role requires qualities beyond those expected of conventional Space Marine commanders. A brother captain must possess the mental fortitude to witness the most horrific demonic manifestations without psychological damage, and the psychic strength to provide stability for his battle brothers in warp-saturated environments. Brother captains are selected not through formal promotion paths, but through a process of psychic consensus among the Brotherhood's senior members and the chapter's Grand Masters. When a position opens, potential candidates undergo the challenge of worthiness, a series of trials that test not just combat skills and leadership, but psychic resilience and purity. The final selection often involves divination rituals, where the chapter's prognosticators seek insights into which candidate would best serve the Emperor's will in the position. Above the brother captains stand the Grand Masters, the chapter's highest-ranking officers and its most powerful psychers. Traditionally numbering 8 to mirror the Brotherhood structure, each Grand Master oversees strategic operations across multiple sectors, while personally intervening in only the most severe demonic incursions. Grand Masters have typically served for centuries, accumulating knowledge and experience that make them among the Imperium's foremost experts on demonic threats. The path to Grand Master status demands mastery of all 666 rituals of detestation, and at least one of the chapter's psychic disciplines at its highest level. Most Grand Masters specialize in a particular aspect of anti-demonic warfare, developing techniques and strategies that are taught throughout the chapter. Some focus on specific demonic types or chaos gods, becoming the ultimate authorities on countering those particular threats. Others develop broader expertise, serving as strategic coordinators for complex operations involving multiple demonic factions. At the apex of the Grey Knights hierarchy stands the Supreme Grand Master, the chapter master who bears ultimate responsibility for the Grey Knights' mission. This position combines operational authority with spiritual leadership, requiring a warrior of exceptional ability and incorruptible character. The Supreme Grand Master serves as the chapter's representative to the Inquisition's Ordo Malleus and, in rare circumstances, to the High Lords of Terra themselves, advocating for resources and authority needed to combat demonic threats. Selection of a new Supreme Grand Master occurs only upon the death or incapacitation of the previous holder, triggering the rite of succession, perhaps the most elaborate ceremony in the chapter's traditions. The 8 Grand Masters gather in the Chamber of Purity, where they enter a collective meditative state to seek guidance from the Emperor's psychic presence. This meditation can last for days or even weeks, during which the participants receive visions and insights regarding the optimal succession. The process concludes when psychic consensus emerges, identifying which Grand Master should ascend to leadership. Beneath these command ranks exist several specialized roles that operate outside the standard hierarchy while supporting the chapter's mission. Among the most important are the Purifiers, an elite cadre considered the chapter's most incorruptible members. Purifiers undergo additional conditioning beyond standard Grey Knight training, developing enhanced resistance to chaos influence and specialized techniques for cleansing warp contamination. They typically operate in small teams, deploying to locations where warp corruption has taken root to perform ritual cleansing operations. Selection for the Purifiers occurs through the Ritual of Purification, a grueling ordeal that tests a Grey Knight's resistance to corruption beyond normal limits. Candidates are exposed to carefully controlled warp energies under the supervision of senior Purifiers, who monitor for any sign of susceptibility. The vast majority of Grey Knights, despite their exceptional purity, cannot withstand the levels of exposure required for Purifier status. Those who succeed join an elite brotherhood within the Brotherhood, often spending decades or centuries in this specialized role before returning to conventional duties. Purifiers maintain their own facilities within the Fortress Monastery, including the Chamber of Purity, where they perform their most sacred rituals. This circular chamber features walls of polished silver inscribed with thousands of protective wards, surrounding a central dais where the eternal flame burns, a psychic fire said to have been kindled from the Emperor's own power. Purifiers use this flame in cleansing rituals, carrying its essence in specially designed sensors during field operations to purify corrupted locations. Another specialized formation within the Grey Knights are the Interceptors, battle brothers who have mastered personal teleportation techniques beyond standard Grey Knight capabilities. While all Grey Knights receive training in teleportation and warp manipulation, Interceptors develop these skills to extraordinary levels, achieving precision and control that allows for tactical applications impossible for conventional forces. Their specialized teleportation packs incorporate additional psychic amplifiers and stabilization systems that work in concert with the operator's own abilities. Interceptors typically deploy as rapid response units, using their unique mobility to reach critical locations before demonic manifestations fully materialize. Their training emphasizes speed and precision over sustained combat power, enabling them to strike at vulnerable points, often targeting summoners or warp anchors that facilitate demonic incursions. In battlefield conditions, Interceptors appear to flicker in and out of reality, materializing to deliver devastating strikes before vanishing again, making them virtually impossible to counter through conventional means. Perhaps the most elite specialized role within the Grey Knights belongs to the Paladins, veteran warriors who serve as the chapter's ultimate battlefield assets. Elevation to Paladin status requires decades of flawless service and demonstration of exceptional skill in both martial and psychic disciplines. Each Paladin has typically faced and banished dozens of greater demons and hundreds of lesser entities, accumulating experience that makes them walking repositories of anti-demonic knowledge. Paladins operate in small squads, rarely numbering more than 5 warriors, deployed only against the most severe threats. Their armor bears additional inscribed wards and incorporates more extensive psychic circuitry than standard Aegis suits, while their weapons, often relic blades passed down through generations, contain power accumulated through centuries of use against warp entities. A single Paladin squad can turn the tide of battles where conventional forces, even other Grey Knights, would be overwhelmed. The selection process for Paladin status involves the challenge of the 8 virtues, a series of trials that test every aspect of a Grey Knight's capabilities and character. Each virtue, valor, wisdom, faith, patience, fortitude, temperance, justice, and purity, corresponds to a specific trial designed to probe for any weakness or limitation. Candidates who display the slightest deficiency in any virtue are rejected, not as punishment, but as recognition that Paladins must embody perfection in the chapter's values. Even among the exceptional warriors of the Grey Knights, perhaps 1 in 100 achieves Paladin status. Operating alongside these combat specialists are the Prognosticars, Grey Knights with particular talent for divination and foresight. These battle brothers serve in the Chamber of Prognostication, a specialized facility deep within the Fortress Monastery, where they monitor the currents of the warp for signs of impending demonic activity. Their work requires them to partially immerse their consciousness in the warp while maintaining the mental discipline necessary to avoid corruption, a dangerous balance that few can maintain for extended periods. The Prognosticars operate in rotation, with individual seers typically serving 4-hour shifts before being relieved to prevent mental fatigue that could compromise their defenses. During their service, they enter specially designed meditation chambers equipped with psychic amplifiers and protective wards. These chambers enhance their natural abilities while providing essential safeguards against the dangers inherent in warp scrying. The information they gather forms the foundation of the chapter's strategic planning, identifying potential hotspots for demonic activity before manifestations occur. This predictive capability represents one of the Grey Knights' most significant advantages in their endless war against demonic forces. While other Imperial organizations typically respond to warp incursions after they occur, the Grey Knights can often deploy preemptively, positioning forces to intercept demonic entities as they attempt to enter real space. This proactive approach has prevented countless catastrophic incursions before they could gain momentum, though the secretive nature of these operations means such successes rarely enter Imperial records. The Prognosticars facility, known as the Augurium, contains the most advanced divination equipment in the Imperium outside of the Emperor's palace itself. The central chamber features a massive hololithic projection of the galaxy, updated in real time with information from the prognosticar's visions. Sectors showing signs of impending warp activity are highlighted with color-coded indicators representing the nature and severity of the threat, allowing Chapter Command to allocate resources efficiently across multiple potential flashpoints. Supporting these specialized roles is the Chamber of Purity, not merely a physical location, but an administrative body responsible for monitoring and maintaining the chapter's incorruptibility. This chamber consists of senior purifiers and chaplains who oversee the regular psychic screening of all Grey Knights, from neophytes to Grand Masters. These screenings occur quarterly for most battle brothers, with more frequent examinations for those regularly exposed to intense warp phenomena or demonic entities. The chamber also maintains the chapter's purification protocols, standardized procedures for cleansing warp contamination from personnel, equipment, and locations. These protocols range from relatively simple rituals for routine post-mission purification to elaborate ceremonies requiring dozens of participants for cleansing severely contaminated sites. The chamber's archives contain thousands of specialized procedures developed over millennia of combating specific demonic entities, each calibrated to counter particular forms of corruption. The weapons and equipment of the Grey Knights represent the pinnacle of the Imperium's anti-demonic technology, each item meticulously crafted not merely to destroy enemies, but to unmake them on a metaphysical level. At the core of this arsenal lies the Nemesis Force weapon, a category of psychically attuned armaments that serve as the primary tools through which Grey Knights channel their formidable mental powers against the denizens of the warp. The creation of a Nemesis Force weapon begins in the sacred forges deep beneath Titan's surface, where master artificers labor in chambers lined with silver and inscribed with thousands of protective wards. Unlike conventional weapons manufacturing, which focuses primarily on physical materials and mechanical function, Nemesis weapons require a perfect balance of material composition, psychic resonance, and spiritual purity. The base materials include adamantium of the highest grade, psychically reactive silver alloys, and trace amounts of materials so rare they exist nowhere else in the Imperium. The forging process extends far beyond mere metalworking. As the physical form takes shape, Techmarine psychers continuously chant binding hexes and purification litanies, imprinting these psychic patterns directly into the crystalline structure of the metal. The weapon is repeatedly heated in furnaces fueled not by promethium, but by the focused mental energies of Grey Knight librarians, then quenched in blessed solutions containing the blood of warriors who have fallen in battle against demons. This cycle of heating and quenching continues for weeks, sometimes months, gradually building layers of psychic resonance within the weapon's structure. Once the basic form is complete, the weapon undergoes further refinement in the Chamber of Consecration, where it is exposed to carefully controlled warp energies under the supervision of senior purifiers. This dangerous process creates microscopic channels within the weapon's molecular structure that will later allow its wielder to direct psychic power through the blade with minimal resistance. The exposure must be precisely calibrated. Too little leaves the weapon insufficiently receptive to psychic enhancement, while too much risks creating vulnerabilities that demons might exploit. The final stage of creation involves binding the weapon to its intended wielder. The Grey Knight spends 7 days in meditation with his future weapon, establishing the initial psychic connection that will grow stronger throughout his service. During this period, microscopic samples of the warrior's blood, bone, and psychic essence are incorporated into the weapon's final components, creating a sympathetic link that makes the weapon responsive to its owners, will even beyond the capabilities of standard force weapons used by other chapters' librarians. Among the various forms of Nemesis weapons, the Nemesis Force halberd stands as perhaps the most iconic. Combining the striking power of an axe with the reach and versatility of a spear, the halberd offers tactical advantages against the often amorphous forms of demonic entities. The weapon's length allows Grey Knights to strike at demons while remaining outside the immediate range of corrupting influences, while the balanced design facilitates both sweeping attacks against groups of lesser entities and precision strikes against the vulnerabilities of greater demons. The halberd's design incorporates several specialized components beyond its basic structure. The blade typically features a distinctive forward sweep that enhances cutting power, while the reverse edge often incorporates a hook or spike useful for controlling an opponent's movements. The shaft contains a network of psycho-conductive filaments that channel energy from the wielder's hands throughout the entire weapon, ensuring that power flows consistently regardless of which portion makes contact with the target. The weapon's head houses the most complex components, microscopic force generators that amplify the wielder's psychic energy, focusing it to a monomolecular edge capable of slicing through both physical matter and the ephemeral substance of demons. Small vials of sanctified oils are often incorporated into the weapon's construction, designed to rupture upon impact and release substances harmful to warp entities. Some halberds wielded by senior Grey Knights feature additional enhancements, such as inscribed scrolls of banishment that activate upon contact with demonic flesh or small reliquaries containing fragments of weapons that banished particularly powerful entities in the past. Other common variants of Nemesis weapons include the Force Sword, favored for its precision and maneuverability in confined spaces, the Demon Hammer, whose concussive force can disrupt a demon's physical cohesion even without direct contact, and the rare Nemesis Falchions, paired blades that sacrifice some raw power for the ability to execute rapid, overwhelming attack sequences that can overwhelm even a demon's supernatural reflexes. Regardless of form, all Nemesis weapons share certain fundamental properties. They serve as conduits for the Grey Knight's psychic abilities, transforming mental energy into a form particularly devastating to warp entities. When activated by their wielder's psychic power, the weapons emit a characteristic silver-blue energy field that disrupts the connection between a demon's warp presence and its physical manifestation. A wound from such a weapon doesn't merely damage the demon's temporary body, but strikes at its essential nature, potentially banishing it entirely if the blow is delivered with sufficient skill and power. Complementing these melee weapons is the Grey Knight's distinctive armor, the Aegis suit. While superficially resembling standard Adeptus Astartes power armor, Aegis armor incorporates numerous modifications specifically designed to protect against warp influences. The most visible difference is the silver plating that covers much of the external surface, not merely decorative but functional, as this special alloy naturally disrupts certain types of warp energy upon contact. The creation of Aegis armor begins with standard Mark 7 or Mark 8 power armor components, which are then extensively modified in the armoring chambers of Titan's Fortress Monastery. The base ceramite plates undergo a series of consecration rituals before being coated with the distinctive silver alloy, a complex mixture containing not just mundane silver, but trace amounts of other materials including psychically active crystals, and according to some sources, microscopic fragments of the Emperor's own armor. What truly sets Aegis armor apart, however, are the inscriptions and wards incorporated into every component. Each plate bears hundreds of protective sigils, some visible to the naked eye, while others exist at microscopic scales visible only under powerful magnification. These inscriptions are not carved or painted, but psychically etched directly into the material using techniques known only to the chapter's master artificers. The patterns form interconnected networks that cover the entire suit, creating a comprehensive defensive matrix that automatically responds to warp threats. The process of inscribing these wards is painstaking and dangerous. Each sigil must be perfect in form and intent, as even minor errors could create vulnerabilities rather than protection. The artificers responsible for this work undergo decades of training before being permitted to work on actual armor components, and even then, their output is rigorously inspected by senior purifiers before installation. The most critical components, the helmet, chest plate, and gauntlets, receive additional layers of warding due to their proximity to vital areas and their role in weapon handling. Beneath the visible surface lies the armor's psycho-circuitry, crystalline filaments embedded in the ceramite that connect to the black carapace interface implanted in the Grey Knight's body. This circuitry serves dual purposes, channeling the wearer's psychic abilities while simultaneously filtering out corrupting influences from the environment. The system includes specialized null field generators that create localized dead zones in the warp, providing additional protection in areas where demonic presence is particularly strong. The helmet of Aegis armor contains some of its most sophisticated systems. Beyond standard auto senses, Grey Knight helmets incorporate warp signature detectors capable of identifying demonic entities even when they attempt to conceal their nature. Psychic amplifiers in the Vox system allow the wearer to project his voice with supernatural authority, while filter systems prevent corrupting influences from entering through respiratory intakes. The helmet's eye lenses include multiple perception layers, allowing the wearer to simultaneously view both physical reality and warp disturbances in the surrounding area. The armor's power pack houses additional protective systems, including a miniaturized version of the null field technology used in larger inquisitorial vessels. This creates a subtle disruption in warp energies immediately surrounding the Grey Knight, making it more difficult for demons to maintain coherence in his immediate vicinity. The power pack also contains backup systems for all critical functions, ensuring that damage to one portion of the armor doesn't compromise its protective capabilities. For ranged combat against demonic entities, Grey Knights rely primarily on two specialized weapon systems, the Psy-Cannon and the Incinerator. The Psy-Cannon represents a significant advancement over standard bolter technology, firing shells composed of silver and psychically charged materials that prove particularly effective against warp entities. The weapon's internal mechanisms include miniaturized force generators that impart additional psychic energy to each round as it leaves the barrel, creating projectiles that can penetrate both physical defenses and the metaphysical barriers demons often employ. The distinctive rectangular profile of the Psy-Cannon houses complex targeting systems calibrated to track the often erratic movements of warp entities. Unlike standard targeting arrays that rely primarily on physical data, Psy-Cannon systems incorporate psychic sensors that detect disturbances in real space caused by a demon's presence. This allows for accurate targeting, even when the entity attempts to conceal itself through illusion or dimensional shifting. The weapon's ammunition feeds from specialized containers that maintain the psychic charge of each round until the moment of firing, ensuring maximum effectiveness upon impact. The Incinerator serves as the Grey Knight's primary area denial weapon, projecting sanctified promethium that burns in both physical and metaphysical planes simultaneously. The weapon's distinctive triple nozzle configuration creates a spread pattern optimized for engaging groups of lesser demons, while the fuel mixture includes blessed oils, powdered silver, and other substances particularly harmful to warp entities. Unlike standard flamers that merely cause physical damage, the Incinerator's flames continue to burn in the warp even after their physical manifestation extinguishes, causing ongoing disruption to a demon's ability to maintain coherence. Both weapons are commonly mounted on Terminator armor variants, allowing Grey Knight veterans to bring overwhelming firepower against demonic incursions. In particularly severe situations, these weapons may be deployed in heavy weapons platforms or mounted on the chapter's limited vehicle assets, creating mobile fire bases capable of cleansing large areas of demonic infestation. Perhaps the most imposing element of the Grey Knight's arsenal is the Nemesis Dreadknight, a specialized combat walker designed specifically for engaging greater demons in close combat. Unlike standard dreadnoughts, which entomb wounded space marines within armored sarcophagi, the Dreadknight is an exoskeletal frame piloted by a living, conscious Grey Knight. This design allows the pilot to directly channel his psychic abilities through the machine's systems, creating a perfect synthesis of mental power and mechanical strength. The Dreadknight stands approximately twice the height of a standard space marine, its open frame revealing the pilot secured in a control harness at the center. This exposed position is not a vulnerability, but a deliberate design choice, allowing the pilot unmediated psychic connection to his surroundings, while the machine's extensive warding systems provide protection. The pilot's armor interfaces directly with the Dreadknight systems, creating a seamless extension of his movements and abilities. The machine's limbs terminate in massive gauntlets capable of tearing apart even the largest demonic entities, while the frame incorporates mounting points for additional weapons, including a scaled-up psy-cannon or the devastating heavy incinerator. The entire structure is covered in the same protective inscriptions found on Aegis armor, though at a larger scale appropriate to the machine's dimensions. Power fields generated by the Dreadknight systems further enhance its combat capabilities, allowing it to match the supernatural strength of greater demons. Maintaining these specialized weapons and equipment requires rituals as complex as those used in their creation. Grey Knights observe strict protocols for the care of their wargear, combining practical maintenance with spiritual purification. After each deployment against demonic forces, all equipment undergoes comprehensive cleansing in the halls of purification, specialized chambers where physical cleaning occurs simultaneously with psychic purging. The process begins with disassembly and inspection of each component, conducted by the Grey Knight himself rather than support personnel. As he examines each part, the warrior recites specific litanies designed to identify and expel any lingering warp influence. Specialized tools including silver-tipped probes and sanctified oils are used to clean areas particularly vulnerable to contamination, such as weapon barrels and armor joints. The relationship between the Grey Knights and the Ordo Malleus represents one of the most tightly integrated partnerships within the Imperium's vast bureaucracy. Unlike other Space Marine chapters that maintain varying degrees of autonomy from Imperial authority, the Grey Knights were established from their inception as the Chamber Militant of the Ordo Malleus, the specialized demon-hunting branch of the Inquisition. This unique arrangement was no accident, but a deliberate design established in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, when both organizations were formally codified as part of the Imperium's defense against chaos. The origins of this partnership can be traced to Malcador the Sigillite himself, who recognized that combating demonic threats would require both investigative authority and specialized military power. The Inquisition would provide the former, the legal authority to requisition resources, conduct investigations, and pass judgment, while the Grey Knights would serve as the ultimate weapon to be deployed once a threat was identified. This symbiotic relationship was formalized in the Compact of Titan, a document signed by the first Supreme Grand Master and the founding members of the Ordo Malleus. Under the terms of this compact, the Grey Knights acknowledge the Ordo Malleus as their primary authority in matters of deployment and strategic priority. Inquisitors of sufficient rank can request Grey Knight support when facing demonic incursions, though such requests pass through a rigorous assessment process before assets are committed. In exchange, the Ordo Malleus provides the Grey Knights with intelligence gathered by their extensive network of agents, access to resources that would otherwise be unavailable to an Astartes chapter, and political protection from other Imperial organizations that might question their methods or authority. The practical implementation of this relationship operates through the Conclave Militant, a specialized administrative body consisting of senior representatives from both organizations. The Conclave meets regularly in secure chambers within the Fortress Monastery on Titan, reviewing intelligence reports and prioritizing responses to emerging threats. Each Brotherhood of the Grey Knights maintains liaison officers specifically trained to work with inquisitorial representatives, ensuring smooth coordination when joint operations become necessary. The assessment protocols for Grey Knight deployment are extraordinarily stringent, reflecting the chapter's limited numbers and the need to prioritize genuine demonic threats over more conventional enemies. When an Inquisitor encounters a situation potentially requiring Grey Knight intervention, they submit a formal request through secure channels to the Conclave Militant. This request must include detailed information about the nature of the threat, evidence supporting the presence of demonic entities, and an assessment of conventional containment options. Upon receiving such a request, specialized prognosticars within the Grey Knights conduct independent scrying operations to verify the information provided. These powerful psychers temporarily extend their consciousness toward the reported location, seeking confirmation of warp activity and assessing the scale of the threat. Their findings are combined with the inquisitorial report to determine an appropriate response level, ranging from a minimal deployment of a single squad to, in the most extreme cases, the commitment of multiple brotherhoods. The conclave employs a standardized classification system for demonic threats, known as the Malleus gradation. This 9-tier system categorizes incursions based on several factors: the power level of the entities involved, the stability of the warp breach, the strategic importance of the location, and the potential for escalation. A gradation 1 threat might involve a single lesser demon or minor possession case, warranting perhaps a single Grey Knight or even just inquisitorial agents with appropriate training. At the opposite extreme, a gradation 9 event represents a full-scale demonic invasion involving multiple greater demons and stable warp rifts, a situation requiring substantial Grey Knight forces and typically resulting in exterminatus protocols for affected worlds. Between these extremes lie the majority of Grey Knight deployments. A typical gradation 4 or 5 threat, perhaps involving a coordinated summoning ritual or a greater demon attempting manifestation, would warrant a strike force consisting of 1 to 3 squads under the command of a Justicar or brother captain. Such deployments occur with relative frequency across the Imperium, though their classified nature means most Imperial citizens remain unaware of these interventions. The operational protocols governing Joint Inquisition Grey Knight missions establish clear lines of authority that can shift depending on mission phase. During the investigation and identification stages, inquisitorial agents typically maintain operational control, leveraging their expertise in uncovering hidden cults and identifying signs of demonic activity. Once a threat is confirmed and combat operations commence, command authority transfers to the ranking Grey Knight officer, whose specialized training in anti-demonic warfare takes precedence. This transition is formalized through the Rite of Assumption, a brief but significant ceremony where the Inquisitor symbolically transfers authority to the Grey Knight commander. The rite typically involves the exchange of mission data via secured data slate, followed by a ritual phrase acknowledging the Grey Knight's primacy in matters of demonic combat. While seemingly ceremonial, this clear delineation of authority has proven crucial in preventing conflicting orders during high-stress combat situations. Throughout Imperial history, numerous joint operations between the Ordo Malleus and Grey Knights have saved countless worlds from demonic devastation, though few such successes are recorded in public histories. The Purge of Corian 9 in the 34th millennium stands as one of the earliest documented collaborations, when Inquisitor Mordecai Toth uncovered evidence of a Tzynkian cult attempting to transform an entire hive city into a warp gate. Toth's investigation provided precise intelligence on the cult's leadership and ritual timing, allowing a strike force from the Grey Knight's Third Brotherhood to teleport directly into the ritual chamber moments before the summoning reached completion. The resulting battle lasted less than 20 minutes, but prevented a catastrophe that would have consumed the entire sector. The Abyssal Crusade of the 37th millennium demonstrated the strategic coordination between the two organizations on a larger scale. When warp storms isolated over 30 Space Marine chapters in the Eye of Terror, the Ordo Malleus deployed Grey Knight forces to critical worlds along the storm's edge, correctly anticipating that demonic forces would attempt to exploit the Imperium's weakened defenses. The Grey Knights established containment zones around nascent warp breaches, while inquisitorial agents rooted out cultist networks attempting to coordinate with the demonic incursions from within Imperial society. Perhaps the most significant joint operation occurred during the First War for Armageddon in the 41st millennium. When the demon Primarch Angron and his World Eaters Legion invaded the vital Hive world, the response involved both substantial Grey Knight forces and inquisitorial assets. Lord Inquisitor Joros coordinated with Supreme Grand Master Joros to deploy over 100 Grey Knights against Angron's forces, one of the largest concentrations of Grey Knights ever committed to a single campaign. While Imperial forces suffered tremendous casualties, the Grey Knights successfully banished Angron back to the warp, preventing the planet's complete loss. The aftermath of Armageddon also highlighted the occasional tensions between inquisitorial authority and Grey Knight tactical assessments. The Inquisition's decision to implement purge protocols against the civilian population that had witnessed demonic manifestations led to conflict with Space Wolves forces that had fought alongside the Grey Knights. While the Grey Knights supported the purge as necessary to prevent knowledge of demons from spreading, some within the chapter privately questioned the scale of the operation and the resulting schism with the Space Wolves, a valuable potential ally against Chaos forces. This incident illustrates one of the recurring points of tension in the Ordo Malleus-Grey Knight relationship, the balance between operational secrecy and military effectiveness. The Grey Knights, while acknowledging the necessity of maintaining the secrecy surrounding demonic existence, occasionally find inquisitorial secrecy protocols tactically limiting. In several documented instances, Grey Knight commanders have advocated for sharing critical information with other Imperial forces when facing particularly severe threats, only to be overruled by inquisitorial authorities concerned about knowledge containment. The months of shame following the First War for Armageddon represented perhaps the most significant strain on the relationship between the two organizations, as the Inquisition and Grey Knights found themselves in direct conflict with the Space Wolves over the fate of Armageddon's population. Internal divisions emerged within both organizations. Some Grey Knight officers, particularly those who had fought alongside other Space Marine chapters, questioned whether the wholesale purging of Imperial citizens was necessary or proportionate. These questions never led to outright disobedience. The Grey Knight's conditioning ensures compliance with authorized orders, but created subtle tensions that would influence future joint operations. Despite such occasional friction, the institutional relationship between the Grey Knights and Ordo Malleus remains fundamentally strong, reinforced by their shared mission and complementary capabilities. The Conclave Militant continues to serve as an effective coordination mechanism, while personal relationships between individual Inquisitors and Grey Knight officers often develop over multiple joint operations, creating informal networks that enhance operational effectiveness. The training regimens of both organizations include specific protocols for joint operations. Grey Knight aspirants receive instruction in inquisitorial authority structures and operational methodologies, while Ordo Malleus Inquisitors undergo specialized briefings on Grey Knight capabilities and tactical doctrines. When possible, joint training exercises are conducted in controlled environments, allowing personnel from both organizations to develop practical experience in coordinated operations before facing actual demonic threats. The logistical aspects of this relationship are managed through dedicated facilities within both the Fortress Monastery on Titan and the Ordo Malleus headquarters. Specialized communication systems, incorporating both technological and psychic components, allow for secure information exchange even in environments where conventional communication might be compromised by warp interference. These systems employ multiple encryption layers combined with psychic verification protocols, ensuring that sensitive deployment information cannot be intercepted or falsified by hostile entities. Resource allocation between the organizations follows established protocols developed over millennia of cooperation. The Grey Knights maintain primary control over their specialized wargear and equipment, with the Ordo Malleus providing critical materials such as the rare ores required for Nemesis weapon production and the specialized components used in Aegis armor. In exchange, the Grey Knights offer technical expertise for the development of anti-demonic equipment used by inquisitorial agents, including portable warding devices and specialized ammunition. Transportation arrangements for joint operations typically utilize Grey Knight vessels when available, as these incorporate more extensive warp protections than standard Imperial craft. The chapter maintains a limited fleet of specialized strike cruisers and rapid insertion vessels, each equipped with enhanced Geller fields and additional warding systems that provide superior protection when traveling through warp-contaminated space. For larger operations requiring substantial troop movements, Inquisitorial Requisition Authority secures appropriate naval assets, which are then modified with temporary protective measures before Grey Knight forces embark. The command structure during extended campaigns follows a tiered approach based on mission phase and threat assessment. Initial investigation phases typically operate under Inquisitorial command, with Grey Knight assets held in reserve until specific demonic threats are confirmed. As operations progress toward direct confrontation with warp entities, tactical control shifts to Grey Knight officers, whose specialized training in anti-demonic warfare takes precedence. Strategic oversight remains a shared responsibility, with senior representatives from both organizations coordinating through secure command nodes established away from the primary combat zones. This flexible command arrangement has proven particularly effective in complex scenarios involving multiple threat types. During the Demon Forge campaign in the Gothic sector, Inquisitorial forces managed the containment of human cultist activities, while Grey Knight strike teams focused exclusively on the demonic entities being summoned through corrupted manufacturing facilities. This division of responsibilities allowed each organization to apply its specialized capabilities appropriately while maintaining overall mission coherence. The Grey Knight's interventions across the galaxy remain largely unknown to the wider Imperium, their victories unrecorded in official histories, and their sacrifices unsung by Imperial poets. This anonymity is by design rather than oversight, a necessary consequence of their sacred duty to combat threats whose very existence must remain hidden from the populace they protect. Yet certain campaigns have grown so significant in scale or consequence that they have left indelible marks on both the chapter's history and the Imperium itself, despite attempts to obscure them. No conflict better exemplifies this paradox than the First War for Armageddon in 444 M41. What began as a relatively conventional invasion by Chaos forces escalated dramatically when a massive space hulk emerged from the warp-carrying Angron, the demon primarch of the World Eaters, and his elite bloodthirster bodyguard. Imperial defenders, including elements of the Steel Legion and the Space Wolves chapter, fought valiantly but found themselves hopelessly outmatched against such entities. As planetary defenses crumbled, an urgent astropathic distress signal reached Titan. The Grey Knight's response was swift and substantial. Supreme Grand Master Joros mobilized over 100 battle brothers, an extraordinarily large deployment for a chapter that rarely operates in numbers exceeding a single squad or strike team. The force included elements from multiple brotherhoods, with particular emphasis on veterans experienced in combating Khornate entities. The deployment utilized the chapter's full complement of strike cruisers, creating a formidable battle group that translated into the Armageddon system at precisely calculated coordinates to avoid the worst of the warp storms surrounding the planet. Initial insertion occurred via precision teleport strikes targeting Angron's primary ritual sites. Grey Knight Terminator squads materialized amid scenes of unimaginable carnage, where the Demon Primarch's forces were conducting mass sacrifices to strengthen their master's connection to real space. The sudden appearance of the silver-armored warriors disrupted several rituals in progress, preventing the manifestation of additional greater demons that would have further tipped the balance against Imperial forces. The campaign reached its climax in the ash wastes outside High Volcanus. Intelligence from Space Wolves' forces indicated Angron was personally leading an assault on the Hive, intending to slaughter its billions of inhabitants in a sacrifice that would permanently anchor his presence in real space. The Grey Knights deployed their full strength to intercept, establishing a defensive perimeter reinforced with portable warding devices and sanctified ground markers. What followed was one of the most devastating battles in the chapter's history. Angron's physical form towered over even the Dreadknight suits deployed against him, his massive demonic axe cleaving through Terminator armor with contemptuous ease. The demon's presence was so powerful that several younger Grey Knights suffered psychic trauma merely from proximity, their enhanced mental defenses strained to breaking point by the concentrated malevolence radiating from the Demon Primarch. The battle's tide turned with the arrival of Brother Captain Termer Aurelian, leading the 3rd Brotherhood's Paladin contingent. Aurelius had fought Angron during a previous manifestation centuries earlier and carried specialized banishment protocols calibrated to the demon's unique warp signature. The Paladins formed a precise ritual formation, their synchronized psychic attacks creating momentary vulnerabilities in Angron's otherwise impenetrable defenses. Taking advantage of these brief openings, Lord Joros himself engaged the Demon Primarch in direct combat. Witnesses from the Space Wolves, who fought alongside the Grey Knights in this exceptional circumstance, described the confrontation as like watching lightning battle an avalanche, Joros' precision and skill against Angron's overwhelming fury and power. The Supreme Grand Master's Nemesis Force Halberd, a relic weapon said to contain fragments of the Emperor's own armor, proved capable of inflicting genuine pain upon the demonic entity. The final banishment came at tremendous cost. Joros and his command squad sacrificed themselves to complete a complex banishment ritual, channeling their combined psychic energy through their force weapons into Angron's physical form. The resulting psychic detonation vaporized everything within a 100-meter radius and created a momentary null zone that severed Angron's connection to the warp. The Demon Primarch's physical form collapsed into itself, drawn back into the Imperium with a reality-distorting implosion that left a perfectly circular depression in the ashen ground. With Angron banished, his demonic legions quickly lost cohesion. The remaining Grey Knights split into strike teams to hunt down and banish the surviving Bloodthirsters and other greater demons, while Space Wolves and Steel Legion forces eliminated the now disorganized mortal followers. Victory had been achieved, but at a devastating price. Over 60 Grey Knights had fallen, including the Supreme Grand Master himself. The aftermath of this hard-won triumph soon revealed the complicated nature of the Grey Knights' relationship with the wider Imperium. Lord Inquisitor Gesme Cisneros, citing standard protocols regarding civilian exposure to demonic incursions, ordered the sterilization or elimination of all Imperial citizens and military personnel who had witnessed the demonic manifestations, a population numbering in the billions. The Grey Knights, bound by their oaths to the Inquisition and understanding the genuine danger posed by knowledge of demons, supported this directive despite its brutal arithmetic. Strike teams were dispatched to assist inquisitorial forces in implementing quarantine protocols, establishing containment zones around population centers and processing facilities where civilians were systematically mind-wiped or, when such techniques proved ineffective, eliminated. This implementation of standard containment protocols met unexpected resistance from Logan Grimnar, Great Wolf of the Space Wolves, who had fought alongside both Imperial guardsmen and civilians during the conflict. Grimnar rejected the necessity of purging those who had loyally defended their world, creating a tense standoff between his forces and the Inquisition Grey Knight containment teams. What followed became known in classified inquisitorial records as the Months of Shame, an escalating series of confrontations between the Space Wolves and the inquisitorial forces, including their Grey Knight allies. Initial diplomatic efforts failed as Grimnar remained intransigent in his protection of Armageddon survivors, going so far as to dispatch Space Wolf vessels to intercept refugee ships targeted for purging. The Grey Knights found themselves in an uncomfortable position during this conflict. Their conditioning and indoctrination left them with no doubt about the necessity of containing knowledge of demonic existence, yet many battle brothers who had fought alongside the Space Wolves felt a warrior's respect for their courage and honor. This internal tension never manifested as disobedience. Grey Knight conditioning prevents such lapses, but created subtle hesitations that experienced inquisitors detected in their Grey Knight counterparts. The conflict escalated when Cisneros ordered a strike against the Space Wolves vessel Gangava, destroying it with all hands to prevent the escape of a ship carrying Armageddon refugees. This action crossed a line for Grimnar, who launched a direct assault on the inquisitorial fleet, personally boarding Cisneros' flagship and slaying the Grand Master of the Grey Knights' 8th Brotherhood, who attempted to prevent his advance. The death of a Grey Knight at the hands of another Space Marine was unprecedented and sent shockwaves through the chapter. Emergency conclave sessions were held on Titan, where heated debate occurred regarding appropriate responses. Some advocated for full retribution against the Space Wolves, while others, particularly veterans who had witnessed Grimnar's effectiveness against Chaos forces, urged caution and diplomatic resolution. Ultimately, the conflict concluded with an uneasy compromise brokered by Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the ancient dreadnought and former great wolf of the Space Wolves. The Grey Knights and Inquisition would cease pursuit of Armageddon refugees already under Space Wolf protection, while the Space Wolves would acknowledge inquisitorial authority in future demonic incursions. Neither side emerged fully satisfied, and relations between the Grey Knights and Space Wolves remained strained for centuries afterward. The Armageddon conflict and its aftermath highlighted a fundamental tension in the Grey Knights' existence. Their necessary role in maintaining the Imperium's ignorance about demonic threats often places them at odds with the very people they are sworn to protect. This tension would manifest again during the Terran Crusade, though under very different circumstances. The Grey Knights' involvement in the Terran Crusade began not with direct combat, but with a rescue operation of extraordinary significance. When the resurrected Primarch Robute Guilliman and his forces became trapped within the Maelstrom, a massive warp storm, during their journey to Terra, they found themselves ambushed by the forces of Kairos Fateweaver, a powerful lord of change serving Tzeentch. Guilliman's forces, despite including elements from several Space Marine chapters, were ill-equipped to combat the demonic entities deployed against them. As the situation deteriorated, with the Primarch himself bound by sorcerous chains that fed upon his tremendous willpower, an astropathic distress signal managed to penetrate the Maelstrom's turbulence and reach Imperial space. The message was intercepted by Grey Knight prognosticars monitoring warp activity around the Maelstrom. Recognizing both the authenticity of the signal and its monumental importance, they immediately convened an emergency session of the chapter's Grand Masters. The implications were staggering. A loyal Primarch, one of the Emperor's own sons, trapped within a warp storm and under direct attack by demonic entities. The decision to intervene was unanimous but required careful planning. The Maelstrom's unpredictable nature made conventional warp travel extremely hazardous, while the concentration of demonic entities within its boundaries presented a contamination risk even to Grey Knights. Supreme Grand Master Kaldor Drago, who had extensive experience navigating hostile warp environments from his time trapped within the Imperium, personally led the rescue force. The strike team consisted primarily of paladins and purifiers, veterans with the strongest resistance to warp contamination. Their approach utilized specialized navigation techniques developed specifically for operations within warp storms, combining technological guidance systems with the psychic foresight of attached prognosticars. The journey itself was harrowing, with the strike cruiser Caribla suffering multiple hull breaches as reality fluctuated around it. Initial contact with Guilliman's forces occurred on the Demon World, where the Primarch was imprisoned. The Grey Knights materialized directly into the heart of 1,000 Suns ritual circle, their precisely calculated teleport insertion disrupting the sorceress bindings at a critical juncture. The sudden appearance of the silver-armored warriors, their nemesis weapons already wreathed in psychic fire, momentarily stunned even the demon sorcerers maintaining Guilliman's imprisonment. This moment of surprise allowed the Grey Knights to establish a defensive perimeter around the weakened Primarch and his surviving honor guard. Purifier squads deployed cleansing flame in expanding circles, creating zones of temporarily sanctified ground within the corrupted environment. This tactical breathing room enabled Guilliman to recover enough strength to actively participate in his own rescue. The extraction proved considerably more difficult than the insertion. Kairos Fateweaver, recognizing the threat posed by the Grey Knights, redirected significant demonic forces to prevent their escape. The strike team found their return path blocked by massed flamers of Tzeentch and Screamers, while Lord of Change heralds attempted to collapse the temporarily stable warp corridors the Grey Knights had established for their retreat. It was during this fighting withdrawal that Drago confronted Kairos directly. The Supreme Grand Master had faced the two-headed demon before during his endless wanderings through the warp, and carried specialized countermeasures against its unique abilities. While Kairos could see both past and future with perfect clarity, Drago had developed techniques to exist partially outside conventional temporality during combat, creating blind spots in the demons' otherwise perfect foresight. The duel between them unfolded across multiple dimensions simultaneously, with physical combat in real space accompanied by a complex psychic struggle that rippled through the surrounding warp. Neither could gain decisive advantage. Drago's sanctified weapons inflicted genuine damage on the demon's manifestation, but Kairos' sorceress abilities kept the Grey Knight off balance with constantly shifting battlefield conditions. The confrontation ended not with victory, but with successful extraction. As the last of Guilliman's forces were teleported to the waiting strike cruiser, Drago broke off his engagement with Kairos and triggered a prepared psychic implosion that temporarily collapsed the local warp structure, creating a buffer zone that prevented immediate pursuit. The journey out of the maelstrom proved nearly as dangerous as the insertion, with the heavily damaged Carablin navigating treacherous currents while carrying far more passengers than intended. The Grey Knights established rotating shifts to maintain protective wards around the ship's Geller field generators, their combined psychic power providing an additional layer of defense against the entities attempting to breach the vessel. When the Carabla finally translated back into real space at the Maelstrom's edge, it encountered an Imperial flotilla led by the Terran fleet. The Grey Knights transferred Guilliman and his surviving forces to these vessels before departing without ceremony, their involvement in the Primarch's rescue known only to Guilliman himself and his closest advisors. Throughout the millennia of their secretive existence, certain Grey Knights have risen to prominence within the chapter's own carefully guarded histories, their deeds recorded in the sealed archives of Titan, even as they remain unknown to the wider Imperium. These warriors embody the chapter's highest ideals, their accomplishments serving as examples for future generations of demon hunters. Yet unlike heroes of other Space Marine chapters who might be celebrated in Imperial propaganda or commemorated with statues and monuments, the greatest Grey Knights remain anonymous legends, their sacrifices known only to their battle brothers. No figure better exemplifies this paradox than Supreme Grand Master Kaldor Drago, whose extraordinary fate has made him simultaneously one of the most accomplished Grey Knights in the chapter's history and one of its greatest tragedies. Drago's early service showed remarkable promise, but followed a relatively conventional trajectory through the ranks. As a battle brother, he distinguished himself during the purging of Jelana, where his squad banished a keeper of secrets that had corrupted an entire planetary governor's lineage. His elevation to Justicar came after the death of his squad leader during operations against the cult of the Red Echo on Malfic 4. Drago's rise continued steadily as his tactical acumen and psychic potential developed in parallel. As brother captain, he led the successful cleansing of the Space Hulk Mephisto's return when it materialized in the Vidar sector carrying a host of Nurglite demons. His promotion to Grand Master came after the massacre at Deltarian Sink, where he assumed command after the death of Grand Master Lyrak and successfully completed the banishment ritual his predecessor had begun. The pivotal moment in Drago's career came during the second scouring of Akralum in 799 M41, when Grey Knight forces engaged a massive demonic incursion led by the demon Primarch Mortarion. The planet's defense had already collapsed, with over 30 million citizens transformed into plague zombies by Mortarion's corrupting influence. The Grey Knights deployed 5 full brotherhoods to contain the threat, teleporting directly into the heart of Mortarion's ritual site to disrupt a plague summoning that would have spread beyond the planet to neighboring systems. During the ensuing battle, Supreme Grand Master Geronatan confronted Mortarion directly, but was struck down by the Demon Primarch's scythe. As Geronatan fell, he transferred the Supreme Grand Master's Aegis, a psychic imprint containing the collective knowledge and authority of all previous chapter masters, directly to Drago, who was the closest Grand Master present. This battlefield promotion thrust Drago into command at the most critical moment of the campaign. Rather than withdraw to regroup, Drago made the fateful decision to continue Geronatan's direct assault on Mortarion. Gathering a strike force of paladins, he fought through layers of plague marines and Nurglite demons to reach the demon Primarch. The confrontation between them lasted nearly 7 hours, with Drago using his newfound authority to coordinate the psychic attacks of all Grey Knights present, while personally engaging Mortarion with his nemesis Force Sword. The tide turned when Drago managed to learn Mortarion's true name, either from the dying thoughts of Geronatan or from the Supreme Grand Master's Aegis, and used this knowledge to momentarily bind the demon Primarch. In that instant of vulnerability, Drago's Force Sword struck true, carving Geronatan's name into the demon's heart. This act of defiance and remembrance created a metaphysical wound that forced Mortarion to retreat into the warp, taking the Grey Knight with him in his banishment. What followed has become the subject of hushed discussions among the chapter's senior members. Rather than being destroyed in the warp as might be expected, Drago continued to exist, his enhanced physiology and extraordinary psychic defenses allowing him to maintain his form and sanity within the Imperium. Reports from various sources, including interrogated demons and psychic visions experienced by the chapter's prognosticars, indicate that Drago continues to wage a one-man war against the forces of chaos within their own realm. Drago's existence in the warp defies conventional understanding. He appears capable of traversing the Imperium at will, materializing wherever demonic activity is greatest to continue his personal crusade. Demons are said to fear the mention of his name, as his presence in their realm represents an impossibility, a mortal not just surviving but actively hunting within the domain of chaos itself. The psychological impact of his continued existence serves as a persistent reminder that even in their own realm, the servants of the dark gods are not safe from the Emperor's justice. Perhaps most remarkably, Drago occasionally manages to manifest back in real space when the barrier between dimensions grows thin. These manifestations are brief, typically lasting only until he completes a specific mission, before the currents of the warp reclaim him. During these temporary returns, he has provided critical assistance to Grey Knight forces facing particularly severe threats, his arrival often turning the tide of otherwise hopeless battles. The chapter has established specialized protocols for such manifestations. When prognosticars detect the psychic signature that precedes Drago's appearance, the nearest Grey Knight forces are instructed to provide whatever support he requires while collecting any strategic intelligence he can provide about conditions within the warp. These encounters are bittersweet for the chapter, as they confirm their Supreme Grand Master still exists but cannot truly return to lead them. Drago's eternal exile represents both inspiration and warning to the Grey Knights. His continued survival demonstrates the effectiveness of their psychic conditioning and anti-demonic training, while his inability to escape the warp serves as a reminder of the terrible price that sometimes accompanies victory against the forces of chaos. Many younger Grey Knights view Drago as the embodiment of their chapter's unyielding determination, while veterans recognize the profound tragedy of his existence, forever fighting, never at rest, unable to return to the fortress he nominally commands. In stark contrast to Drago's extraordinary fate stands Castellan Garen Crow, whose burden keeps him firmly anchored in real space despite potentially greater dangers. As Castellan of the Purifier Brotherhood, Crow already occupied one of the chapter's most demanding positions, responsible for warriors considered the most incorruptible among an already incorruptible brotherhood. Yet his greater challenge comes from his designation as the Blade Bearer, custodian of the Black Blade of Antwer. The Black Blade represents one of the most dangerous artifacts in the Grey Knight's possession. A demon sword of extraordinary potency, it contains a bound entity of such malevolence and cunning that previous custodians have invariably fallen to its corrupting influence despite their enhanced mental defenses. The blade constantly attempts to subvert its wielder through a combination of psychic assaults, whispered promises, and subtle manipulations of perception. Its ultimate goal appears to be finding a wielder powerful enough to unlock its full potential while susceptible enough to be controlled. Crow's assignment as the blade's custodian came after the previous bearer, Castellan Arven, succumbed to its influence and had to be executed by his battle brothers. The choice of Crow was not made lightly, extensive psychic screening identified him as possessing mental fortitude significantly above even Grey Knight norms. His previous service showed an unshakable focus in the face of demonic influence, particularly during the purging of the reliquary of Zunus, where he remained untainted despite extended exposure to powerful Slaaneshi artifacts. What makes Crow's guardianship unique is his approach to the blade. Unlike previous custodians who attempted to use the weapon's power while resisting its influence, Crow refuses to draw the sword in combat. He carries it sheathed at all times, using a standard Nemesis Force sword for battle, while bearing the constant psychic assault of the contained demon without accessing its power. This approach represents not just extraordinary willpower, but a fundamental philosophical stance that some corrupting influences cannot be safely utilized, only contained. This burden affects every aspect of Crow's existence. He must maintain constant vigilance even during rest periods, as the blade intensifies its attacks when his conscious defenses might be lowered. His quarters within the Purifier Keep contain additional warding beyond standard Grey Knight protections, with regular monitoring by senior librarians to detect any signs of growing influence. Despite these precautions, the continuous strain has left visible marks, a perpetual tension in his bearing, and a focused intensity that can be unsettling even to other Grey Knights. In battle, Crow faces the additional challenge of protecting the blade from being claimed by enemy forces, while simultaneously preventing it from exploiting the heightened emotions and psychic turbulence of combat. During the demon incursion on Chain 4, Crow was specifically targeted by Tzynkian forces seeking to claim the blade, requiring him to fight through multiple layers of demons while keeping the weapon secure. His solution, fighting with his force sword while keeping his other hand firmly on the black blade's hilt to prevent it being drawn or taken, has become his signature combat style. The psychological burden of the blade's constant presence has paradoxically made Crow one of the chapter's most effective warriors against certain types of demonic threats. Having endured years of the most sophisticated psychic assaults imaginable, his resistance to external influence has developed to extraordinary levels. During the cleansing of the heretic cardinal's palace on Sacris 7, Crow remained functional despite sorceress attacks that incapacitated several other purifiers, allowing him to reach and banish the cardinal's demonic patron while his battle brothers recovered. Crow's unique burden has created a complex legacy within the chapter. Young aspirants are taught his story as both inspiration and cautionary tale, a demonstration of the unrelenting vigilance required in their war against chaos and the dangers of overconfidence when dealing with warp entities. Veterans regard him with a mixture of respect and concern, recognizing both his extraordinary service and the likelihood that eventually, despite his best efforts, the blade will claim him as it did his predecessors. A more recent addition to the chapter's roster of heroes emerged during the tumultuous events of the Gathering Storm. Grand Master Aldrich Valdis rose to prominence as warp storms engulfed the galaxy and demonic incursions increased exponentially following the fall of Cadia. Already a respected leader within the Third Brotherhood, Valdis distinguished himself during the Terran Crusade when he led a strike force to assist the reborn Primarch Robute Guilliman. Valdis's involvement began when the prognosticars detected a unique psychic signature trapped within the maelstrom, a presence of such magnitude that it could only belong to one of the Emperor's sons. Recognizing the strategic importance of such a discovery, the Grey Knights deployed a specialized extraction team under Valdis's command. Their mission required not just martial prowess but exceptional navigational skill, as they would need to penetrate deep into one of the galaxy's most dangerous warp storms. The extraction operation succeeded against overwhelming odds, with Valdis's force locating and freeing Guilliman from the sorceress traps laid by Kairos Fateweaver. During this operation, Valdis demonstrated not just tactical acumen but diplomatic skill, effectively coordinating with the disparate Imperial forces accompanying the Primarch, despite the Grey Knights' typical isolation from mainstream Imperial organizations. This ability to work alongside other Imperial factions would prove crucial in the events that followed. Upon Guilliman's return to Terra, and his appointment as Lord Commander of the Imperium, he made the unprecedented decision to acknowledge the Grey Knight's existence publicly within the highest echelons of Imperial leadership. As part of this new approach, he requested that a high-ranking Grey Knight serve as advisor on demonic threats within his Primaris conclave. Valdis was selected for this role, becoming part of the triumvirate of the Imperium alongside Guilliman and Belisarius Cawl. This appointment placed Valdis in an extraordinarily delicate position. Grey Knight doctrine had always emphasized absolute secrecy, with knowledge of their existence restricted to the highest levels of the Inquisition. Serving openly, even in a limited capacity, represented a fundamental shift in chapter operations. Valdis navigated this transition by strictly limiting the information he shared, providing tactical advice regarding demonic threats without revealing the chapter's specific capabilities or the location of their fortress monastery. Valdis's most significant contribution came during the Indomitus Crusade, where his expertise helped identify and prioritize worlds suffering from demonic incursions rather than conventional chaos forces. This distinction, often overlooked by standard Imperial tacticians, allowed for more efficient allocation of the limited Grey Knight forces available. In several critical instances, Valdis personally led small strike teams to eliminate demonic leadership, while Guilliman's main forces engaged their mortal servants, creating strategic victories with minimal exposure of Grey Knight operations. The relationship between Valdis and Guilliman evolved into one of mutual respect, though not without tensions. The Primarch's rational, logistical approach to warfare sometimes clashed with the more esoteric methods employed by the Grey Knights. Valdis frequently found himself explaining why certain demonic threats required specialized responses that might seem inefficient from a purely military perspective. These disagreements never escalated to open conflict, but created an underlying tension that both leaders managed through professional courtesy and recognition of their shared ultimate goals. Among the chapter's notable heroes, Brother Captain Arvan Stern occupies a unique position due to his recurring conflict with a specific demonic entity. Most Grey Knights encounter a wide variety of warp entities throughout their service, but Stern's career has been defined by his ongoing struggle against the demon prince Cashin, a lord of change who has developed a particular hatred for the Grey Knight officer. Their first encounter occurred during the purging of Sacristan in 723 M41, when Stern was still serving as a Justicar. His squad was deployed to investigate reports of mass hallucinations affecting an entire hive city, discovering too late that these were precursors to a major Tzintkian incursion. As reality warped around them, Stern's squad found themselves confronting Cashin as he completed a ritual to transform the city's population into mindless spawn. Despite being outmatched, Stern managed to disrupt the ritual at a critical moment, creating a cascade failure that banished Cashin back to the warp before the transformation could be completed. This initial victory came at terrible cost. 3 of his battle brothers died in the confrontation, and Stern himself suffered psychic injuries that required months of recovery in Titan's Apothecarian. More significantly, the encounter created a metaphysical connection between Stern and the demon, each leaving an imprint on the other's essence. This connection has manifested in repeated encounters across multiple worlds and decades. Cashin appears able to sense Stern's presence when they are in proximity, often diverting resources to target him specifically, even when such actions undermine broader strategic objectives. Conversely, Stern has developed an intuitive awareness of the demon's machinations, sometimes detecting Cashin's influence in situations where other Grey Knights perceive only generic warp signatures. Their most significant confrontation occurred during the defense of Sardan Prime, when Cashin manifested at the head of a demonic host numbering in the thousands. By this time, Stern had risen to the rank of Brother Captain and commanded the full resources of his brotherhood. The ensuing battle lasted 17 days, with Stern methodically dismantling the demon's support structure before confronting him directly in the ruins of the planet's primary cathedral. The duel between them demonstrated how thoroughly each had studied the other over their repeated encounters. Cashin employed sorcerous attacks specifically calibrated to exploit weaknesses he had identified in Stern's psychic defenses, while Stern countered with banishment techniques modified to address the demon's known evasion patterns. The confrontation ended with another banishment, but not before Cashin revealed his ultimate intention, claiming that each encounter allowed him to gather more information about Grey Knight methods, gradually building toward a future victory, not just over Stern, but the chapter itself. The Grey Knight's prognosticators have confirmed that this threat is not mere demonic boasting. Each encounter between Stern and Cashin creates a stronger sympathetic link, potentially allowing the demon to gain insights into Grey Knight operations that would normally be protected by their psychic security measures. Yet attempts to keep Stern from engaging with Cashin have proven counterproductive, as his unique understanding of the demon's methods makes him the most effective counter to its schemes. This dilemma has led to the implementation of special protocols for Stern's deployments. He undergoes additional psychic screening before and after any engagement with Tzintkian forces, while librarians monitor the metaphysical connection for any signs of information flowing in the wrong direction. His equipment receives supplementary warding, specifically designed to block the types of sorcerous examination Cashin has attempted in previous encounters. The Ritual of the Thousand Eyes stands as perhaps the most fundamental psychic technique in the Grey Knight's arsenal, allowing them to perceive the true form of demonic entities without suffering the corruption that typically accompanies such forbidden knowledge. Unlike conventional Imperial forces who must avert their gaze or rely on filtered auto-senses when confronting warp entities, Grey Knights can look directly upon their foes, gaining tactical advantages that would otherwise be impossible. The ritual's origins date back to the chapter's founding, when Malcador the Sigillite recognized that effective demon hunters would need to perceive their enemies clearly while remaining uncorrupted. Working with the Emperor himself during the final days before the Siege of Terra, Malcador developed a psychic technique that would restructure a warrior's visual cortex and associated mental architecture to process demonic appearances without the contaminating influence that typically accompanies such perception. The implementation of this ritual occurs during the final stages of a Grey Knight's training, after they have mastered the basic 666 rituals of detestation and demonstrated sufficient psychic control to safely undergo the procedure. The initiate is brought to a specialized chamber deep within Titan's fortress known as the Hall of Reflections. This circular room features walls composed of polished obsidian inscribed with microscopic wards that create a self-contained psychic environment, preventing any leakage of energies during the delicate procedure. At the chamber's center stands a silver basin filled with a mercury-like substance that is actually a complex psycho-reactive compound. This liquid responds to psychic energy by forming patterns that reflect warp entities in their true form. The initiate kneels before this basin, surrounded by a circle of 8 senior Grey Knights who serve as anchors and safeguards during the ritual. Each of these veterans has undergone specialized training to monitor for signs of corruption and intervene if necessary. The ritual begins with the presiding librarian reciting the Litany of True Sight, an intricate incantation that establishes the psychic framework for what follows. As the litany progresses, the liquid in the basin begins to ripple and form images, carefully controlled representations of demonic entities drawn from the chapter's extensive knowledge rather than actual summoned presences. The initiate must gaze into these reflections, while the surrounding Grey Knights channel specific energies into his visual cortex, rewiring his perception at a fundamental level. What makes the ritual particularly dangerous is that it requires the initiate to fully open his psychic senses while viewing these images, creating a temporary vulnerability that could allow corruption to take root. The surrounding Grey Knights maintain a complex network of protective wards throughout the procedure, constantly adjusting their psychic output to match the initiate's responses. This delicate balance must be maintained for approximately 12 hours, as the initiate's mind is systematically exposed to increasingly disturbing and reality-defying demonic forms. The final phase of the ritual involves the presentation of specific sigils that represent the true names of various demon classes. As the initiate views each sigil, the surrounding Grey Knights implant psychic triggers that will automatically activate protective mental shields when similar patterns are encountered in combat situations. These triggers operate below the level of conscious thought, creating instinctive defenses that engage faster than even a Grey Knight's enhanced reactions could voluntarily activate. Upon successful completion, the initiate gains the ability to perceive demons as they truly are, seeing through their illusions, glamours, and misleading forms to the underlying warp structure that defines them. This perception extends beyond visual senses to include an intuitive understanding of a demon's nature, strengths, and vulnerabilities. In practical combat situations, this translates to the ability to identify critical weaknesses that might be exploited for banishment or destruction. The ritual's name derives from the approximate number of neural pathways that must be modified to achieve this perceptual shift, roughly 1,000 specific connections that collectively alter how the brain processes warp-influenced visual data. The precision required explains why the procedure cannot be rushed or simplified, even for the psychically gifted recruits of the Grey Knights. Attempts to accelerate the process have invariably resulted in failure, often with catastrophic consequences for the initiate. Complementing this perceptual ability is the Grey Knight's mastery of the rite of exorcism, not a single technique, but a complex framework of banishment methods adapted to counter specific classes of demonic entities. Unlike the crude exorcism rituals employed by the ecclesiarchy or even the Inquisition, Grey Knight exorcism represents a sophisticated metaphysical science that targets the specific mechanisms by which demons maintain their presence in real space. The foundation of these techniques lies in understanding that different demon types maintain their material forms through distinct anchoring methods. Cornate entities typically rely on the psychic energy generated by bloodshed and violence, creating a self-perpetuating cycle where their manifestation causes violence that further strengthens their presence. Tzintkian demons anchor themselves through complex webs of causality and probability manipulation, often establishing secondary and tertiary anchor points as contingencies. Nurglite manifestations root themselves in decay and disease, using spreading corruption as both weapon and anchor. Slaaneshi entities feed on and anchor through extreme sensation and emotional states, particularly those involving excess and obsession. Grey Knight exorcism protocols are calibrated to disrupt these specific anchoring mechanisms rather than simply attacking the demon's physical form. Against cornate entities, the rite of tranquility creates a localized field that dampens emotional responses, reducing the psychic energy available from violence and rage. The physical component of this rite involves precise movements and positions adopted by the Grey Knights, forming geometric patterns that naturally disrupt the warp currents favored by Khorne's servants. For Tzintkian demons, the rite of unmaking employs counter probability fields generated through specific psychic frequencies that collapse the demon's carefully constructed causal networks. This technique requires precise timing, as the Grey Knights must identify and target the primary anchor points in the correct sequence to prevent the demon from shifting its dependencies to backup mechanisms. The physical component often includes the use of specially consecrated silver dust thrown in precise patterns that reflect and disrupt the mathematical structures underlying Tzintkian manifestations. Nurglite entities face the rite of purification, which combines conventional cleansing elements like sanctified flame with psychic techniques that accelerate entropy within the demon's own structure, while halting it in the surrounding environment, effectively turning Nurgle's own methods against his servants. The physical components include specific combustible compounds that produce smoke capable of disrupting the chemical and biological processes that Nurglite demons establish in real space. Against Slaaneshi manifestations, the Rite of Tranquility employs sensory nullification fields that create zones of perfect psychic silence, cutting the demon off from the emotional and sensory inputs it requires to maintain form. The physical aspects include precisely modulated sonic projectors built into Grey Knight armor that generate cancellation patterns against the frequencies Slaaneshi entities prefer. These specialized techniques are taught to Grey Knights through a combination of theoretical study and practical application under controlled conditions. Junior Battle Brothers typically begin with simplified versions of each rite, gradually incorporating more complex elements as their skills develop. Veterans may eventually develop their own variations, optimized for their particular psychic strengths or to counter specific demon subtypes they have repeatedly encountered. The application of these rites in combat situations requires both precise execution and tactical flexibility. Grey Knights must often perform complex psychic operations while under direct attack, maintaining concentration despite physical danger. Training exercises simulate these conditions, with aspirants performing exorcism rites while servitor units programmed with combat behaviors attempt to disrupt them. Only those who can maintain perfect ritual execution while defending themselves advance to field deployment. Perhaps the most closely guarded aspect of Grey Knight knowledge is the gathering of names, the systematic collection and memorization of demons' true names to gain power over them. In the metaphysics of the warp, a demon's true name is not simply a label, but an encapsulation of its essential nature. Knowledge of this name grants significant power over the entity, allowing a properly trained psyker to disrupt its manifestation or even temporarily bind it to their will. The Grey Knights maintain the most extensive collection of demonic true names in the Imperium, stored within the Librarium Daemonica on Titan. This vast repository contains names ranging from the most minor warp entities to several of the greatest demons serving the Chaos Gods. Each name is recorded using specialized mnemonic systems rather than conventional writing, as the act of inscribing a true name creates a minor connection to the entity that could potentially be exploited. Access to this knowledge is strictly controlled, with Grey Knights typically learning only those names relevant to their current mission. The memorization process involves specialized psychic techniques that store the name in a partitioned section of the Grey Knight's mind, protected by multiple layers of warding to prevent the knowledge from creating unwanted connections to the named entity. This compartmentalization allows the Grey Knight to access the name when needed while minimizing contamination risks. The process of learning a demon's true name begins with preparation in one of the chambers of utterance, specialized rooms within the fortress monastery, designed to contain the psychic resonance generated when a true name is spoken. The walls of these chambers are lined with sound-absorbing materials inscribed with nullification wards, while the floor features concentric circles of silver inlay that create a containment field around the speaker. Under the supervision of a librarian, the Grey Knight enters a meditative state that activates specific mental structures created during their initial conditioning. These structures form a type of psychic buffer, allowing the warrior to process and store the true name without direct exposure to its corrupting influence. The name is then transmitted through a combination of verbal instruction and direct mind impulse, bypassing conventional sensory channels to minimize distortion. Once memorized, the name becomes a powerful weapon in the Grey Knight's arsenal. In combat, properly invoking a demon's true name causes it immediate distress, disrupting its concentration and weakening its connection to real space. More complex applications include binding rituals that can temporarily force the demon to answer questions or prevent it from taking certain actions. The most powerful applications, reserved for the chapter's senior members, include permanent banishment techniques that use the true name to sever the demon's connection to real space so completely that it cannot return for thousands of years. The strategic value of this knowledge cannot be overstated. In numerous campaigns, Grey Knights have turned seemingly hopeless situations by deploying true name knowledge against key demonic leaders. During the Siege of Vrax, Brother Captain Arven Stern used the true name of the demon prince Emkari to force it into a vulnerable state, allowing for its banishment despite the protection of multiple overlapping warp rifts. Similarly, during the purging of the Elixia system, Grand Master Valdar Orican used his knowledge of 3 linked demon names to collapse an entire demonic hierarchy, causing the simultaneous banishment of over 1,000 lesser entities that depended on the named demons for stability. The collection of new true names represents one of the chapter's ongoing priorities. When Grey Knights encounter previously undocumented demonic entities, specialized codiciers employ psychic techniques to extract naming patterns from the warp energies surrounding the manifestation. This dangerous process requires the codicier to extend his consciousness partially into the Imperium, while maintaining sufficient anchoring in real space to avoid being drawn in completely. The extracted information is then brought back to Titan for verification and cataloging, expanding the chapter's resources for future encounters. The final layer of the Grey Knights' protective traditions lies in their cleansing protocols, the rigorous purification procedures performed after each mission to ensure no contamination returns to Titan. Unlike conventional Space Marine chapters that might perform symbolic cleansing rituals, Grey Knight purification is a literal necessity, removing actual warp contamination that could otherwise take root and spread. The standard cleansing sequence begins immediately upon mission completion, with field-level purification performed before Grey Knights even board their transport vessels. This initial cleansing involves the application of sanctified oils to armor seals and weapon housings, combined with recitation of minor wards that dissolve surface-level contamination. While primarily practical rather than ceremonial, this process includes traditional elements dating back to the chapter's founding, maintaining continuity with practices established by the first Grey Knights. Upon returning to their vessels, Grey Knights undergo more comprehensive cleansing in specialized chambers equipped with both physical and psychic purification systems. Armor is removed piece by piece, with each component passing through consecrated flames that burn away warp residue without damaging the physical material. The Grey Knight himself enters a purification chamber where sanctified water infused with silver particles washes away bodily contamination, while automated servitors chant continuous purification litanies that create a cleansing psychic field. For missions involving direct contact with greater demons or particularly virulent warp phenomena, additional protocols are implemented. These include temporary quarantine of the returning Grey Knights, with senior librarians conducting thorough psychic examinations to identify any subtle contamination that might have escaped the standard cleansing procedures. In rare cases where contamination is detected, more intensive purification methods are employed, ranging from targeted psychic surgery to remove corrupted mental patterns to, in extreme cases, induced coma, while librarians systematically cleanse the affected battle brother's psychic presence. The chapter's equipment receives equally thorough attention. Weapons exposed to demonic entities undergo specialized cleansing rituals based on their construction and the specific entities encountered. Nemesis force weapons, being psychically attuned to their wielders, require particularly careful treatment to ensure no warp resonance remains within their crystalline structures. This typically involves a 3-day purification cycle where the weapon is submerged in consecrated oils, exposed to purifying flames, and finally subjected to psychic cleansing by its owner to restore the proper attunement patterns. The formation of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift that tore the galaxy in half, marked a fundamental shift in the Grey Knight's operational reality. As the Imperium spilled into real space across vast stretches of the galaxy, demonic incursions increased exponentially, stretching the chapter's resources to unprecedented limits. Where once they had responded to isolated manifestations, now they faced a galaxy where the barrier between dimensions had fundamentally weakened, creating conditions that favored their ancient enemies. The immediate aftermath of the Great Rift's formation saw emergency protocols activated across all Grey Knight brotherhoods. Prognosticars working in continuous shifts struggled to prioritize responses as thousands of worlds simultaneously reported warp phenomena. The chapter's command structure, designed for surgical precision rather than broad-spectrum warfare, faced the impossible task of allocating limited forces against near-unlimited threats. Supreme Grand Master Kaldor Drago, briefly manifesting in real space during this crisis, convened an emergency conclave of all available Grand Masters. The gathering, held in the Sanctum Sanctorum on Titan, resulted in the implementation of the Terminus Protocol, a contingency plan developed millennia ago for scenarios where demonic activity exceeded the chapter's response capacity. This protocol fundamentally altered the Grey Knight's deployment methodology, shifting from comprehensive responses to triage-based interventions focused on containing the most severe threats while accepting that lesser incursions would go unchallenged. Under the Terminus Protocol, the chapter's forces were reorganized into smaller, more mobile strike teams capable of rapid response to critical situations. Where previously a full squad might deploy against a single greater demon, now individual battle brothers or pairs were dispatched to confront threats that would have warranted far larger deployments in earlier eras. This adaptation came with significant risks. Grey Knights operating without their customary support structure faced greater personal danger, but necessity overrode traditional safety margins. The chapter's relationship with the Ordo Malleus similarly evolved under these extreme conditions. Traditional assessment protocols, which had required extensive verification before Grey Knight deployment, were streamlined to enable faster response times. Inquisitors received enhanced authority to directly request Grey Knight intervention in clear emergencies, bypassing layers of confirmation that had previously served as safeguards against misallocation of these precious resources. These adaptations proved essential as the chapter confronted the new reality of a galaxy bisected by the Great Rift. In the Imperium Nihilus, the Dark Imperium cut off from Terra's light, Grey Knight forces found themselves operating with minimal support and often no possibility of reinforcement or extraction. Brother Captain Arvan Stern, leading elements of the 8th Brotherhood in the Connor system when the rift formed, spent 3 years conducting continuous operations against demonic incursions without contact with Titan, relying on locally sourced supplies and improvised rituals to maintain his force's purity in the absence of proper cleansing facilities. The nature of demonic threats also evolved in response to changing warp conditions. Where previously demons required complex summoning rituals or significant bloodshed to manifest, the weakened barriers allowed for more spontaneous materializations triggered by even minor emotional disturbances. Grey Knights encountered new manifestation patterns that defied established categorization, forcing them to develop novel banishment techniques in the field without the usual support from the Librarium Daemonica. Perhaps most concerning were reports of demon princes achieving unprecedented stability in real space. These powerful entities, once limited to relatively brief manifestations before the warp reclaimed them, now established semi-permanent presences on worlds near the Great Rift. The most notorious example occurred on Sangua Terra, where the demon prince Ethelin maintained corporeal form for over 7 months, creating a kingdom of horror that required the combined efforts of 3 Grey Knight strike forces to dismantle. This increased demonic stability created strategic challenges beyond simple combat response. Stable manifestations allowed warp entities to implement longer-term corruption strategies, establishing cult networks and infrastructure that could sustain their presence indefinitely. Grey Knights found themselves conducting extended campaigns rather than the rapid banishment operations that had been their standard approach, requiring adaptation of tactics and resource management to accommodate these longer engagements. The strain on Grey Knight resources manifested in multiple dimensions. The purely numerical challenge, too few warriors for too many threats, represented only the most obvious problem. Equally concerning was the accelerated attrition rate as battle brothers fell in increasingly dangerous deployments. The chapter's recruitment and training processes, already among the most selective in the Imperium, could not be meaningfully accelerated without compromising the exacting standards that made Grey Knights effective against demonic threats. Equipment maintenance presented another critical challenge. The specialized wargear used by Grey Knights requires extensive rituals and specialized materials to properly maintain, particularly after exposure to warp entities. With battle brothers constantly deployed and supply lines disrupted by the Great Rift, maintaining the chapter's arsenal became increasingly difficult. Tech Marines developed field expedient maintenance protocols that, while less thorough than traditional methods, allowed for continued operations under compromised conditions. Perhaps most concerning was the psychic toll on individual Grey Knights. Even with their extraordinary conditioning, continuous exposure to warp phenomena creates cumulative strain that eventually affects performance. Veterans who had previously served centuries with only occasional need for extensive purification now required more frequent cleansing rituals, while younger battle brothers accumulated exposure at rates that threatened to shorten their effective service lifespans. The chapter's apothecaries and librarians developed enhanced monitoring protocols to identify warriors approaching their tolerance thresholds before permanent damage occurred. Despite these challenges, the Grey Knights adapted with the same methodical determination that had characterized their service since the chapter's founding. Grand Master Valdis, working closely with the returned Primarch Robute Guilliman, implemented strategic reforms that maximized the impact of limited Grey Knight resources within the broader Imperial defense structure. Rather than attempting to address all demonic threats directly, the chapter increased its advisory role, providing specialized training to select inquisitorial forces and even certain trusted Space Marine chapters in basic anti-demonic protocols. This strategic shift represented a significant departure from the chapter's traditional approach to information security. For millennia, the Grey Knights had maintained absolute secrecy regarding demonic lore, considering knowledge of such entities inherently corrupting. The new reality of widespread warp incursions rendered this approach increasingly untenable. Too many Imperial forces were encountering demons without proper preparation, resulting in unnecessary casualties and corruption. The compromise position involved carefully calibrated knowledge sharing, providing practical countermeasures without revealing the deeper metaphysical truths that remained restricted to properly conditioned Grey Knights. The arrival of Primaris Space Marines created another dimension of adaptation for the Grey Knights. As Guilliman's new generation of enhanced Astartes deployed across the Imperium, questions inevitably arose regarding their potential integration into specialized chapters. For the Grey Knights, this question carried unique complications beyond those faced by conventional chapters. The Grey Knights' effectiveness stemmed not merely from physical capabilities, but from their specialized psychic conditioning and unique gene seed derived from the Emperor himself rather than Primarch stock. Initial assessment conducted by the chapter's apothecaries and librarians suggested significant challenges to Primaris integration. The psycho-indoctrination protocols developed by Belisarius Cawl, while impressive for standard combat purposes, lacked the specialized anti-demonic conditioning essential to Grey Knight operations. Similarly, the enhanced physiology of Primaris Marines, while offering combat advantages, had not been designed with the unique psychic requirements of demon hunting in mind. More fundamental was the question of gene seed compatibility. The Grey Knight's unique genetic heritage, derived directly from the Emperor's genetic material rather than through a Primarch lineage, created potential incompatibilities with the Primaris enhancements, which had been calibrated for standard Astartes physiology. Preliminary testing indicated significant rejection risks and potential compromise of the specialized psychic structures that made Grey Knights resistant to warp influence. These technical challenges were compounded by doctrinal considerations. For 10 millennia, the Grey Knights had maintained perfect purity through their specialized selection and training protocols. Introducing a new variable, particularly one developed outside their direct control, represented an unprecedented risk to this unbroken record. The chapter's leadership, while recognizing the potential advantages of Primaris capabilities, approached the question with characteristic caution, unwilling to compromise their essential nature for tactical advantages. The resolution came through a measured approach developed jointly by the Grey Knights' senior apothecaries and representatives from Archmagos Call's research teams. Rather than immediate implementation of full Primaris conversion, the chapter began a long-term research program to develop specialized variants of the Primaris enhancements compatible with their unique physiology and psychic requirements. This process, expected to require decades of careful testing and refinement, would proceed in parallel with the chapter's traditional recruitment and training, ensuring operational continuity while exploring potential future adaptations. In the interim, the Grey Knights developed enhanced coordination protocols with Primaris forces deployed by other chapters. When circumstances required Grey Knights to operate alongside these enhanced Astartes, specialized briefing packages provided the Primaris Marines with sufficient information to support anti-demonic operations without exposing them to dangerous knowledge. These joint operations proved particularly effective against hybrid threats involving both demonic entities and conventional chaos forces, allowing each group to focus on targets best suited to their capabilities. Beyond these organizational adaptations, the Grey Knights evolved their tactical approaches to address the changing nature of demonic threats in the post-Cicatrix galaxy. The increased prevalence of demon princes, particularly those associated with specific chaos gods, required development of specialized countermeasures tailored to their unique characteristics and vulnerabilities. Against Nurgle's champions, who typically manifested with unprecedented physical resilience and corrupting auras that could contaminate even well-protected Grey Knights, the chapter developed the Purification Nexus, a tactical formation where purifiers created overlapping fields of cleansing flame, while interceptors executed precision teleport strikes against identified vulnerabilities. This approach minimized exposure time while maximizing damage to the demon's anchoring mechanisms, forcing banishment before corruption could take hold in the engagement zone. Tzynkian demon princes, who exploited the thinned barriers to implement complex probability manipulation and reality distortion, faced the null equation protocol. This approach combined conventional anti-sorcery techniques with specialized psychic algorithms developed by the chapter's librarians to identify and target the mathematical underpinnings of Tzynkian manifestations. By disrupting these patterns, Grey Knights could collapse the cascade of cause and effect manipulations that made these entities particularly dangerous in strategic operations. The heightened presence of Slaaneshi entities near the Great Rift necessitated development of enhanced sensory filtering protocols. The penumbral screen technique, taught to all Grey Knights operating in affected regions, created layered psychic barriers that selectively blocked the frequencies used by Slaaneshi demons to bypass conventional defenses. Combined with modified Aegis circuitry that dampened certain neural pathways without compromising combat awareness, these adaptations allowed Grey Knights to engage the sensory manipulating demons without succumbing to their influence. Perhaps the most significant tactical evolution came in response to intelligence, suggesting the potential return of additional demon primarchs following Mortarion and Magnus's reemergence. The chapter established the Primarch Countermeasure Directorate, a specialized research cell combining the expertise of veteran demon hunters with historical information from the chapter's sealed archives regarding the original Primarch's capabilities and weaknesses. This directorate developed tailored response protocols for each potentially returning Primarch, based on historical personality patterns and known demonic affiliations. For Angron, whose previous manifestation during the First War for Armageddon had cost the chapter dearly, they created the Wrath Dispersion Protocol, a combined arms approach designed to separate the demon Primarch from his cornate support structure, while exploiting his predictable rage-driven tactical choices. Fulgrim's potential return prompted development of the Mirror Shatter approach, which combined sensory disruption techniques with targeted strikes against the psychological vulnerabilities inherent in the demon Primarch's narcissistic nature. For Lorgar, whose mastery of warp lore made him particularly dangerous, the Directorate established the Wordbreaker Protocol, a complex counter-ritual system designed to disrupt the specialized warp harmonics that characterized his previous manifestations. These preparations, while untested against their intended targets, demonstrated the Grey Knight's methodical approach to even the most overwhelming threats. Rather than despairing at the prospect of confronting corrupted primarchs, demigods further empowered by demonic ascension, the chapter analyzed, planned, and prepared, maintaining the disciplined response that had served them through 10 millennia of confronting humanity's worst nightmares. As the Dark Millennium progressed and the Indomitus Crusade fought to stabilize Imperial holdings, the Grey Knights continued their eternal vigil from the shadows. Their numbers remained perilously few against the vastness of the threat, perhaps no more than 1,000 warriors against countless demonic entities, yet they persevered with the same quiet determination that had characterized their service since the Emperor's final command brought them into being. In many ways, the post-Cicatrix galaxy represented the ultimate validation of the Grey Knights' existence. The scenarios against which they had trained for millennia, widespread demonic incursion, weakened dimensional barriers, direct intervention by the greatest servants of the Chaos Gods, had come to pass. Though stretched beyond their limits and operating under compromised conditions, they continued to stand as the Emperor's final bulwark against the horrors of the warp. The Grey Knights remain the thin silver line between humanity and the darkness that hungers for its soul. As new threats emerge and old nightmares return, they continue their silent war, unknown to those they protect, uncelebrated even in victory, yet unwavering in their sacred duty. In the darkest age of the Imperium, when the light of the Astronomicon struggles to penetrate the Great Rift and demonic laughter echoes across 1,000 worlds, the Grey Knights fight on, humanity's last defense against the unspeakable.